बैनर देना ना,
वीडियो क्लिप
कौन से उस पे तो हम नमस्कार, हम आपके सम्मुख दोबारा आ गए हैं नए एपिसोड्स के साथ। अगला जो पार्ट है हमारा पार्ट 10, और अब इसमें हम जो भी कंटेंट है वो आपके सामने लेके आएंगे। और बिना समय वेस्ट करे हुए मैं पहले दादा का नमस्कार कर दूं। नमस्कार दादा, और हमारी सारी पब्लिक को भी नमस्कार, जो आने वाली है, जो ज्वाइन करेगी उनको भी, और जो ऑलरेडी ट्यून है उनको भी।
इस एपिसोड के बारे में थोड़ा बता देते हैं। इस एपिसोड में हम लोग डिस्कस करेंगे कि नेहरू जी ने किस तरीके से हमारे यहाँ पर अपनी डिक्टेटरशिप के चक्कर में सत्यानाश किया था। जो आप अगर इसके बारे में पढ़ना चाहें तो डिस्क्रिप्शन में पढ़ सकते हैं कि हम लोग क्या क्या डिस्कस करने वाले हैं।
तो बिना समय व्यर्थ करे हुए मैं आपको ले चलता हूँ डायरेक्ट अपने डॉक्यूमेंट पे, और वहां से स्टार्ट करते हैं। मैं इसकी विजिबिलिटी थोड़ी सी सही कर दूं। तो ये हम आ गए हैं अपने कंटेंट पे। अब यहाँ से स्टार्ट करेंगे आज। ब्लंडर 90, no defalsification of history. All if all others accepted the lie which the party imposed, if all records told the same tale, then the lie passed into history and become truth. Who controls the past? Ran the party slogan. Controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. The past, he reflected, had not merely been altered, it had been actually destroyed. तो ये जॉर्ज ऑवेल की 1984 की कोटिंग है, यानी ये उन्होंने लिखा है। हिस्ट्री इज not written by the haunted, losers and colonized. It is written by the hunters, winners, colonizers. It is meant to serve the purpose. It is meant to serve their purpose. The British, rich in their knowledge and experience of barbaric colonization, knew well how to prolong their oppressive colonization and prolong their rule in India. Physical control through force of arms have their limitations, but mental control can go a long way. If you have to exploit nations and subjugate their people on a long-term basis for decades and centuries, you can't do it by brutal force alone. You have to shake the confidence of the people in themselves. You have to make them feel they are nothing, and they were nothing before the aggressors. To this end, we have to rewrite and reinterpret their story, religion, and culture to show how worthless it is in comparison to that of the exploiter. This is what the British politicians, bureaucrats, army men, writers, novelists, and historians did. Hammer into the colonized, they are inferior, that they are nothing, that they are meant to be ruled. How? Control control and change their education system, their books, concoct, concoct, rewrite, distort history. The British has had to had so depicted Indian history and civilization over the almost 2 centuries of their dominance that anything Indian had been shown in bad light, and anything of the West as something superior. And it had been so skillfully done that foreigners or English do not have to do it anymore. It is in the Indians themselves who have become self-abusive and appreciators of all things English or Western. Part of part of the reason is that the economy did so badly under the Gandhis, and India became so pathetic that the people felt there was something in interestingly in, intrinsically deficient about India and the Indians. Rather than blaming Nehru or Indira Gandhi or the dynasty for their disastrous politics, people began to feel anything Indian was bad, anything foreign was good. Had India done well after independence, the impression would have been dramatically opposite. Say what you have read. You say what you have read and are told. Many books were written by the English and the other foreigners like Max Muller, a German, parts of which were either incorrect or on account of limited or deficient research, or deliberately biased and false to serve the imperial or the religious proselytization interests. In the absence of the books depicting correct position, these books came to be read widely. In the absence of the books depicting correct position, these books came to be read widely, and some of them became textbooks too. Indians have been taught and told that the English and the Christians desired and manufactured to serve their interests. Indians came to believe it. So did others. People abroad in other countries also read these books. Down the generations, all started believing the lies as truth. Many Indian writers too based much of their contents on these books written by foreigners rather than on new research. So the writings of the Indian authors also started suffering from the same deficiencies, including that of Nehru. तो यहाँ ये बताना चाह रहे हैं कि जितना भी गलत हिस्ट्री उन्होंने पढ़ाई थी, मतलब कि अगर किसी आपको रेस को कॉलोनाइज करना है तो उनको गलत हिस्ट्री पढ़ाओ, ऐसी हिस्ट्री पढ़ाओ कि वो उनको अपने अंदर ही इंफीरियोरिटी कॉम्प्लेक्स आ जाए और जो कॉलोनाइजर्स हैं उनकी संस्कृति बेटर लगने लगे, सुपीरियर लगने लगे। और यही क्योंकि कंटेंट कोई और अवेलेबल नहीं था, तो उसकी वजह से इसी कंटेंट को ही टेक्स्ट बुक का भी हिस्सा बनाया गया, इसी कंटेंट को ही हमारे लोगों ने पढ़ा, इसी कंटेंट कंटेंट को बाहर के लोगों ने पढ़ा, और इसी कंटेंट पे बेस्ड जो है उनका काम है हिस्टोरियंस का। उन्होंने खुद रिसर्च नहीं करी, जबकि जिस समय इंडिपेंडेंट हुए थे तो हमें खुद अपना जो है डायरेक्ट सोर्सेस से सारी इंटरप्रिटेशंस खुद दोबारा करनी थी। यही है ना दादा?
हाँ,
जो कि आज तक की हिस्ट्री में यही प्रॉब्लम चल रही है। Here are perceptive comments from a genuine scholar, Dr. K. M. Munshi, on his forward to his book, The History and Culture of Indian People, are unreliable sources of information insofar as they are foreign, are almost invariably tainted with a bias towards India's conquerors. The treatment of the British period is period in most of our histories is equally defective. It generally reads like an unofficial report of the British conquest and the benefits derived by India from it. The history of India as dealt within most of the works of this kind naturally therefore lacks historical perspective. Unfortunately for us, during the last 200 years, we had not only to study such histories, but unconsciously to mold our whole outlook of life upon them. Generations after generations during their school or college career were told about the successive foreign invasions of the country, but little about how we resisted them and less about our victories. They were taught to decry the Hindu social system. और यहाँ ये रेफरेंस दे रहे हैं हमारे एक स्कॉलर का डॉक्टर के एम मुंशी का। वो कह रहे हैं कि ब्रिटिश पीरियड में जो सारी बुक्स लिखी गई हैं, जितने भी हमारे चैनल्स ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन है, जिस तरीके से भी इंफॉर्मेशन हमारे पास आती थी, वो बेसिकली वेस्ट बायस थी और उसी के अकॉर्डिंग ही हमारी 200 साल की सारी जनरेशंस निकली हैं। और इस हिस्ट्री में हमेशा जितने भी ऑपरेसर्स हैं उनको बहुत ग्लोरीफाई किया गया और ये दिखाया गया कि हमने कभी रेजिस्ट ही नहीं किया, बहुत कम दिखाया गया और हमारी विक्ट्री भी बहुत कम दिखाई गई। इस वजह से ये जो इंफीरियोरिटी कॉम्प्लेक्स है वो लोगों में आज तक है, आज तक अभी भी खत्म नहीं हुआ है वो। और ये जो है, ये हमारी जो हिंदू सोशल सिस्टम है इसको टारगेट करता था, मतलब इसको डिफेम करने के लिए, इसको डिमोरलाइज करने के लिए ये सारा प्रॉब्लम है। इसीलिए सेकुलरिज्म भी जो डिजाइन करा गया वो एंटी हिंदू डिजाइन किया गया। सिलेक्ट ठीक से नहीं होता दादा। हाँ ठीक है। इफ द ब्रिटिश केम अक्रॉस समथिंग रिमार्केबल which showed India far ahead of the West in the past, they discovered its link with the West. If there was something very distinguished about the Aryans, well, they came from the West. India was subject to Aryan invasion and so on. There have been many research findings and writings to the contrary since, and yet the false interpretation is allowed to continue in India even today. Apart from further archaeological revelations, the intercontinental research in cellular molecular biology has debunked the AIT Aryan invasion theory. Of course, there is no last word of such things, but there are good reasons to believe that both so-called Aryans and the Dravidians belong to India only and did not come from outside. That has been proved through DNA studies also. Further, David referred
द्रविड़
to
द्रविड़
हाँ, further Dravid referred to as geographical region and not to a race. और ये अभी इसीलिए जो है हमारा एक बहुत बड़ा डिवाइड जो है वो आर्यन द्रविडियन थ्योरी के ऊपर है, जो कि इन्हीं का खड़ा करा गया है, जो भी आज तक चल रहा है। उसके अलावा लैंग्वेज बैरियर्स और आ गए हैं उसमें।
नीचे आ जाओ, उसके बाद में सी द कनिंग ऑफ द ब्रिटिश, सी द कनिंग ऑफ द ब्रिटिश इन प्रोपेगेटिंग द आर्यन रेवेन थ्योरी, ये पढ़ो।
कौन से नंबर पे दादा?
पैरा पैरा नीचे, सी द कनिंग ऑफ द ब्रिटिश इन प्रोपेगेटिंग द
ठीक है
आर्यन
ठीक है, समझ
रेवेन
गया
थ्योरी।
समझ गया, ये वाला है। ठीक है, सी द कनिंग ऑफ द ब्रिटिश in propagating the Aryan Dravidian theory. It helped create divisions, North versus South, among Indians. It helped them show that if there was something superior about the Aryans, it was because they came from the West. It also helped them show that the India has been ruled by different groups who came from the West. First the Aryans, then the Muslims, and then the British. If British were foreigners, then so too were Muslims and Aryans. So why crib about foreign rule? That is their rule, especially when they had come only to civilize the natives and do good for the country. One can understand the purpose and motivation of the British and other foreigners, but for the Indians to talk like them.
कितना बेवकूफ बनाया है, कितना बेवकूफ बनाया है भाई इन लोगों ने। और अभी तक इंडिया वाले बेवकूफ बन रहे हैं, बिकॉज हम लोग किताबें चेंज करने को तैयार नहीं है।
हाँ किताब, अरे मरे जा रहे हैं लिब्रांडू, नहीं चेंज नहीं होगा, चेंज नहीं होगा। मुगल वहां से बिरयानी लाए थे। मतलब आप देखो इतनी अटर नॉनसेंस बोलते हैं, मुगल वहां से बिरयानी लाए थे, कहां से लाए थे? जहां धान ही नहीं होता है। धान क्या मेरे मुंह में बो रहे थे वो, जब पानी नहीं है। The general effect of Dharampal's work among the public at large has been intensely liberating. However, the conventional Indian historians, particularly the class that has passed out of the Oxbridge,
ब्रिज
out of Oxbridge, ये Oxbridge क्या है दादा? ये कोई
वही
अलग यूनिवर्सिटी है क्या? कैम्ब्रिज से अलग या ऑक्सफोर्ड से अलग?
ऑक्सफोर्ड का ही है ना, वही कैम्ब्रिज और
अच्छा,
ऑक्सफोर्ड को मिला के बोल रहा है ना वो,
अच्छा,
कैम्ब्रिज।
अच्छा, अच्छा, ऑक्सब्रिज, समझ गया, समझ गया। ऑक्सफोर्ड एंड कैम्ब्रिज को मिला के ऑक्सब्रिज, ठीक है। हैव बीन have seen his work as a clear threat to doctrine, blind have seen his work as a clear threat to doctrines blindly and mechanically propagated a thought on them for thought by them for decades. Certainly, he does not manifest the kind of certainty that is really available to the individuals who have drunk unquestioningly at the feet of English historians, gulping down not only their facts but their assumptions as well. But to him goes the formidable achievement of asking well entrenched historians probing questions, the questions are they are hard to put to answer, like how come they arrive so readily with so little evidence, and the conclusion that Indians were technologically primitive, or more generally how they were unable to discover the historical documents that he, without similar training, had stumbled on so easily. Dharampal's unmaking of the English generated history of Indian society has in fact created a serious enough gap today in the discipline. The legitimacy of English or colonial dominated perceptions and biases about Indian society has been grievously undermined. Claude Alvars, Alvars, Claude
अल्वारेज,
Alvars,
अल्वारेज बोलते हैं इसको, अल्वारेज।
Alvarez. On one of the tasks after independence should have been honest and faithful rewriting of Indian history that has been thoroughly distorted by the West by taking the following steps: setting up a large multidisciplinary competent team free from Marxist, secular, and biased historians to engage in intensive research and writing of history and social and economic life of India through the ages in as unbiased manner as possible, pointing out the flaws and gaps and errors in the existing historical works and supplementing them, and making available the new research material and the corrected works in various forms: detailed academic work for further research, textbooks for schools and colleges, books for general reading in an interesting form, and illustrated books for children. All necessary support should have been given to them: academic encouragement, financial help, incentives, ample opportunities, rewarding career for collection and compilation of all available source materials. Historical fiction too should have been encouraged. Historical fiction too should have been encouraged. We need quality books that like that of Amitav Ghosh. Yes, thanks to Nehru and his dynasty, there was no attempt to write the true history of India post-independence. There has been little genuine work in Indian history after independence by the establishment. No, no worthwhile books and textbooks on the Indian history have come from the Indian Academy. If some genuine work has been done, it is mostly by those outside of the establishment, notably from historians like Jadunath Sarkar, R.C. Majumdar, Sitaram Goel, Dharampal, and so on. The
इनकी
school
बुक को
and
कोई
college,
पढ़ने नहीं देता है,
हाँ,
इनको हमेशा
ये
क्रिटिसाइज
दादा
करते
इन्होंने
रहते हैं, गलत लिख रहे हैं, गलत लिख रहे हैं, गलत लिख रहे हैं, ये बोलते रहते हैं इनको।
दादा इन्होंने कब्जा कर रखा है, इनको कभी हार्ड क्वेश्चनिंग करी नहीं गई। अगर इनको पूछो कि तुम्हारे पास एविडेंस क्या है, एविडेंस दो, यहाँ सामने रखो, और एविडेंस नहीं हो तो इनको जो है वहीं पनिश करना चाहिए, पब्लिक में ही। इन्होंने पूरे 140 करोड़ की जनता को एकदम वो बना दिया, मतलब क्या कहते हैं उसको, सेल्फ कॉन्फिडेंस एकदम तोड़ दिया इन्होंने।
ये नीचे वाला पैरा हम लोगों ने पढ़ लिया है, पहले कभी ऊपर आया है, इसको नहीं पढ़ते, छोड़ दो।
ठीक है, एआईटी तो बता दिया ना।
हाँ, ये
ये तो कई,
ये याद आ रहा होगा तुम्हारे को, ये मुगल रूल जो है, औरंगजेब 1526 से लेकर
हाँ
मुगल
हाँ हाँ
रूल खत्म हो गया था, ये सब आ गया ना, ये बाली में थे, अंकोर
हाँ
वाट में थे, कल हम लोगों ने पढ़ा था ना
हाँ,
ये।
राज राज चोला वगैरह इन सब के जो हमारे वो नहीं बताए इन्होंने।
हम्म, ये भी कल पढ़ा
किधर
है हम
से
लोग ने।
किधर से चालू करना है दादा?
91 करो, ये भी कल
91।
पढ़ा है शायद।
ये आपने कल बैक एंड में पढ़ा, बैक स्टेज में पढ़ा था।
नहीं नहीं, ये ऊपर वाला, ये जो है ना, ये यहाँ पे है ना, क्या बोलते हैं, नेट रिजल्ट, नॉट ओनली द डिस्टार्टेड इंडियन हिस्ट्री रिमेन अनचेंज एंड कॉलोनियल, इट वाज एक्चुअली बिकम फर्दर वर्ड्स विद मार्क्सिस्ट ये क्या है, नेगेनिस्ट इंटरप्रिटेशन एंड डिस्टॉर्शन एज द नेक्स्ट थ्री ब्लंडर्ड सब चैप्टर्स ब्रिंग आउट। यहाँ तक हम लोगों ने पढ़ लिया था, ये 90 कल पढ़ लिया था लगता है। एनीवे, ये पढ़ो, चलो, ये है आज का।
ये वाला थोड़ा सा एक बार रिपीट कर देता हूँ।
सुनो ना, हिस्ट्री हिस्ट्री गलत लिखी है, खत्म करो उसको, और नई हिस्ट्री
हाँ,
नहीं लिखी, आगे जाओ।
नहीं दादा, वो उसमें भी तो हिस्ट्री, इसने टेम्पलेट तो उसने बनाया ना, डिस्कवरी ऑफ इंडिया जो बुक है, और नेहरू की
नहीं
बुक ने टेम्पलेट
मैं क्या बोल रहा हूँ, ये कल हम लोगों ने पढ़ा है, ओपन उसमें पढ़ा है तुमने, मैंने बोला 90 तक पूरा कर लेते हैं, शायद 90 हमने कल कर दिया था इसको।
अच्छा,
हम्म,
ठीक है। अब ये 91 आते हैं। बीइंग क्रिएटिव हिस्ट्री विद हिस्ट्री, deliberate Nehruvian Marxist distortions, rather than doing what has been elaborated in the previous subchapter of blunder. The concerned establishments came to be dominated by the self-serving Babu academics and the Nehruvian Marxists and socialists who bureaucratized the academics and ensured emasculation of the direction to what suited the Marxist worldview and the convenience of the establishment. What we have been having are political hangers on rather than capable scholars. There have, thanks to above, the biased, distorted version of history written by the West was continued. Rather than demolishing it, our eminent Sarkari historians reinforced the nonsense. While the English distorted Indian history for their colonial ends, the Indian leftist Marxists have been further distorting history for their ideological ends and to place their masters. Arun Shoury's book, Eminent Historians, Their Technology, Their Line, Their Fraud, is worth reading in this context. This self-serving, dishonest Nehruvian Marxist academics have done great disservice to the profession of writing history. They sideline the genuine ones like Jadunath Sarkar and R.C. Majumdar, sending them to oblivion. Oblivion. Why they done so? It paid to do so. You came you came in the good books of Nehru himself, an Anglophile, and thereafter in the good books of his dynasty. You got good positions and assignments, academic
जेएनयू में प्रोफेसरशिप
mediocre.
मिल जाएगी, दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी में प्रोफेसर बन जाओगे, और क्या चाहिए,
हाँ,
कहीं के एम्बेसडर बना देंगे
academic.
तुम्हारे को।
दादा ये जितना भी क्या नाम है एकेडेमिया है, इनकी जो बॉडीज हैं जो अपॉइंट करती हैं लोगों को, उनमें भी यही है।
वो आरके गुहा कौन है? आरके गुहा ऐसे तो है, जिंदगी भर उसने नेहरू की चमचागिरी की है।
Academic mediocrity was no hindrance to promotions and plum positions as long as you toward the Nehru's Marxist socialist negationalist line. Not only that, by being pro-British or being soft on the British, you got invited by the West for academic assignments, lectures, seminars, and so on. Also, your mediocre writings got published abroad and were well reviewed. You also got Indian and international awards. In other words, it is paid to be dishonest,
Dishonest
unprofessional,
and
and
professional
abusive
in a way.
to the real India. In other words, ये इनके हालात हैं. Nehru love for English and his leftist learning spawned a generation of leftist historians who rewrote Indian history in English and put the evidence of history in its head. B.N. Sharma. The Marxist negationalist historians have made India out to have been an empty land filled with successive invaders. They have made present day India and Hinduism even more so out to be a zero
Jew.
and out to be a zoo and agglomer- agglomer- agglomeration of assorted, disparate specimens. No such thing as India, just a geographical expression, just a construct of British. No such things in Hinduism, just a word used by Arabs to describe the assortment they encountered. Just an invasion of the communalists to impose a uniformity. That has been their stance. For this, they have blackened the Hindu period of history, and as we shall see, strained to whitewash the Islamic period. They have denounced ancient India's social system as the epitome of oppression. They have they have denounced ancient India's social system as the epitome of oppression and made totalitarian ideologies like Christianity, Islam, and communism out to be
Egalitarian.
and just.
अरुण सूरी साहब बोल रहे हैं. तुम्हारा यूट्यूब चल रहा है क्या?
नहीं दादा, पंखा चल रहा भले पीछे.
हैं?
पंखा थोड़ा भले चल रहा है मेरा.
इको कहाँ से आ रहा है? इको कहाँ से आ रहा है?
एक बार बंद हुई थी इको जब मैंने बंद करा था वो माइक.
नहीं तो तुमने बोलो तभी तो समझ में आएगा ना कि हाँ इको आ रहा है कि नहीं आ रहा है.
हाँ अभी
तुम बोलोगे, मैं जब बोलता हूँ ना,
हाँ
तो इको आता है. जैसे होता है ना वो यूट्यूब किसी का चल रहा, थोड़ी देर मतलब 7-8 सेकंड के बाद आती है ना आवाज, वैसे ही आती है आवाज वो.
अच्छा, डिलेड आवाज.
हाँ, अभी नहीं आ रही.
अभी नहीं आ रही ना. वैसे
हाँ.
मेरा यूट्यूब चल तो नहीं रहा था, बट मेरा वो यूट्यूब खुला हुआ था होम. मैं सुनने के लिए खोला था ना, तो फिर होम पे डाल दिया था उसको मैंने.
हाँ, तो वो चल रहा होगा, वहीं से आ रही होगी वो. उसको वो कर दो, साइलेंट कर दो उसको, आवाज बंद कर दो उसकी.
नहीं, वो तो साइलेंट ही था. वो सिर्फ जैसे मैंने एक बार देखने के लिए देखा था, फिर उसके बाद होम पे बटन पे क्लिक कर देते तो बस सारे आइकन्स आ जाते हैं. चल नहीं रहा होता कोई भी.
हाँ, नहीं, वो जो
ठीक है अरुण
यूट्यूब पे
सॉरी.
जो आवाज है ना उसको साइलेंट में कर दो ना, तो यूट्यूब चलता रहेगा. लेकिन आवाज मैंने अभी कर रखा है ना, अपना यूट्यूब चालू करके रखा है, मेरे को आवाज नहीं आ रही, मैंने साइलेंट करके रखा हुआ है.
हाँ, मेरा भी साइलेंट होता है अगर कभी जरूरत होती है तो. लेकिन अभी तो साइलेंट भी नहीं था, वो तो बाहर ही था. मैं उसमें बस यूट्यूब खुला हुआ था, बस इतना था. चल कोई वीडियो नहीं रहा था.
मैं इसको
ठीक
पढ़ता
है
हूँ
फिर
आगे वाले को, संदीप कृष्णा वाले, बालकृष्ण वाले को टेस्ट करने के लिए कि अब इको आ रहा है कि नहीं आ रहा, देखने के लिए. ठीक है.
हाँ.
संदीप बालकृष्ण साहब लिख रहे हैं अपने बुक में. संदीप बालकृष्ण साहब एक ऐसे ऑथर हैं जिन्होंने काफी हिस्ट्री के ऊपर बुक लिखी है और अपना हिंदुइज्म के ऊपर काफी उन्होंने काम किया है. वो लिख रहे हैं, इनफैक्ट marked characteristics of the leftist ransack of Indian history is the systematic manner in which they have succeeded in brainwashing at least 3 generations of Indian to be ashamed of, taking pride in timeless unbroken culture and local tradition and accomplishment to the extent that both lay reader and students are repelled and therefore disown them. 3 जनरेशन बर्बाद कर दिया इन लोगों ने, बताओ 47 से ना, यस 3 जनरेशन गई. This perversion also extends to our heroes, saints, poets, philosophers, and the rest. Perhaps in no other country has self-hatred succeeded and touched in its pinnacle as it has in India. अभी प्रॉब्लम क्या हो रही है? अगर आप ये बोलो कि आर्यन थ्योरी जो है गलत है और आर्य लोग बाहर से नहीं आए थे, वो सब यहीं के थे, तो जितने भी पुराने वाले बंदे हैं वो तुम्हारे को बेवकूफ समझते हैं, बोलते क्या बकवास कर रहा है, तुम लोग संघी हो, तुम लोग बीजेपी वाले हो, ऐसे करके बोलते
नहीं दादा, इनको अब आयरन हैंड से डील करना पड़ेगा दादा. ये जो लिखा है संदीप बालकृष्णन ने, ये गलत है. मैं आपको बताता हूँ सही क्या है. 800 साल मुगल के प्लस 200 साल इनके, 40 जनरेशन वो हो गई, प्लस 3 जनरेशन, 43 जनरेशन का इनके ऊपर वो है. ये कॉन्टिन्यूटी है ना.
संदीप इस कंटेक्स्ट में बोल रहा है कि जब इंडिया फ्रीडम हो गया ना, वहां से बोल रहा है. पहले तो ब्रिटिश के हाथ में था, ब्रिटिश जो भी लिखवाएंगे, लेकिन तुमने क्या किया? नेहरू के अंडर में, इंदिरा जी के अंडर में क्या हुआ उस समय? तो हिस्ट्री सही लिख लेते, इसलिए बोल रहा है वो 3 जनरेशन बर्बाद कर दी तुमने.
हाँ नहीं दादा, मैं इसलिए लिख रहा हूँ कि बैलेंस आप देखोगे, अगर आपके पास ऊपर बैंक का बैलेंस है 100 रुपए और आपने 50 रुपए और लोन ले लिया, तो वो 150 होगा, ठीक है, वो 50 रुपए नहीं होगा, ठीक है. इसी कॉन्टेक्स्ट में मैं बोल रहा हूँ 1000 साल वो, तो 40 जनरेशन वो हो गई, प्लस 3 जनरेशन इन्होंने 43 जनरेशन बर्बाद करी है. इनको सजा वैसी मिलनी चाहिए, इनकी जनरेशन को भी सजा मिलनी चाहिए, जो पैदा हुए हैं उनको भी सजा मिलनी चाहिए, उन्होंने भी खाया है उनका पैसा.
अगला पढ़ता हूं, देख लेना, बहुत भयंकर है. दर्शकों ध्यान से सुनो. What the Nehruvian Marxist historian did, inverted commas शुरू कर रहा है, in no specific order, it includes a demonization of Brahman as the root cause. आज की डेट में ब्राह्मण लोग जूता खाते हैं ना, वो नवबुद्धों से, इसीलिए जूता खाते हैं. As the root cause of everything wrong with India, from the ancient past to the present. And then there is the whitewashing of the long and voluminous record of Muslim atrocities against Hindus, genocides, forced conversion, industrial scale temple destruction, and the economic emasculation of Hindus by impressing the jizya tax and dhimmi status upon them. This narrative simultaneously also downplays the cultural, civilizational, and economic excellence attained by India under great Hindu dynasties like Mauryas, Sungas, Guptas, Satvana, Chola, Chalukyas, Hoysalas, and the Vijayanagar Empire, to name just few. अरे बेवकूफो, ब्रिटिश लोग यहाँ पर मुश्किल से 190 साल रहे थे, विजयनगर एम्पायर तो 300 साल रही थी, उसके बारे में कुछ भी नहीं लिखते, 1 या 2 पेज में खत्म हो जाता है हिस्ट्री में, अपना बुक पूरी कर देते हैं कि हाँ चलेगा. अब ये पढ़ो 92 नेहरू एंड निगेशनिज्म. सब मना कर दो, ये नहीं हुआ था, वो नहीं हुआ था. व्हाट इज Negetonism? Negetonism means the denial of historical crime against humanity. It is not a reinterpretation of known facts, but the denial of known facts. The term negativism has gained currency as that name as the same of movement of to deny a specific crime against humanity. The Nazi genocide on the Jews in 1941, also known as Holocaust. बट उन्होंने सुधार लिया अपने आप को ना, जर्मन लोगों ने सुधार लिया. Negativism is an illegitimate and deliberate distortion or denial of historical fact or record. In the Indian context, it is the denial and or dilution and or deliberate misinterpretation and or rationalization of the terrible, dastardly, and inhuman crime spread over roughly a millennium against, वो जो तुम बोल रहे हो, 1000 साल, against Hindus by the Muslim who invaded and ruled India. That millennium Hindu Holocaust, many times worse than Jewish Holocaust, have yet to be documented. अरे हिंदुओं जाग जाओ, अब तो जाग जाओ। अभी भी बेवकूफ लोग जैसे सर्वे आ रहा है वहां पे कांग्रेस को वोट दे रहे हैं, नालायक कहीं के। What they did, as described by historian, as per article on www.jewsnews.co.il, il मतलब Israel. The genocide suffered by the Hindus of India at the hands of Arab, Turkish, Mughal, and Afghan occupying forces for the period of 800 years is yet firmly unrecognized by the world. The Holocaust of the Hindus in India was of even greater proportion. The only difference was that it continued for 800 years till the Bushel regime were effectively overpowered in a life and death struggle by the Sikhs in the Punjab and Hindu Maratha armies in other parts of India in the late 1700. We have elaborate literary evidence of the world's biggest and Holocaust from existing historical contemporary eyewitness account. The historian and biographer of the invading armies and subsequent ruler of India have left quite detailed record of the atrocities they committed in their day-to-day accounts encounter with India's Hindus. These contemporary records boasted about and glorified the crime that were committed and the genocide of the tens of millions of Hindus, mass rape of Hindu women, and the destruction of thousands of ancient Hindu Buddhist temples and libraries have also been documented and provide solid proof of the world's biggest Holocaust. फ्रैंकिया गटर इन हिज बुक, ये फ्रांस का है, हिंदुस्तान में रहता है।
दादा
हाँ
1 मिनट अपना वाला डॉक्यूमेंट शो करना, 10 मिनट का, मेरे को 15 मिनट का गैप चाहिए, थोड़ा सा दवाई लगानी है ना।
ठीक है, मैं करता हूँ।
हाँ, अपना वाला डॉक्यूमेंट आप शो करो तब तक।
1 मिनट
मैं सुन रहा हूँ, सुनते सुनते दवाई लगा रहा हूँ।
Frankia Gatter, in his book Rewriting Indian History, wrote, "The massacres perpetrated by Muslims in India are unparalleled in history, bigger than the Holocaust of the Jews by the Nazis or the massacre of the Armenians by the Turks, more extensive even than the slaughter of the South African native population by the invading Spanish and Portuguese." चुल्लू भर पानी में डूब मरो हिंदुओं जो कांग्रेस को सपोर्ट करते हो। एलन डेनियलॉव, in his book Histoire de l'Indus, right, from the time of Muslims started arriving around 632 AD, the history of India becomes a long monotonous series of murders, massacre, spoliation, and destruction. It is as usual in the name of holy war of their faith, of their soul, God, and the barbarian have destroyed civilization, wiped out entire race. The blood of the infidel flowed so copiously at Thanesar that the stream was discolored, notwithstanding its purity, and people were unable to drink it. The Sultan returned with plunder, which is impossible to count. ये मोहम्मद गजनवी के बारे में लिख रहा है, उनका सेक्रेटरी था। क्या नाम है ये? तारिके यमनी ऑफ उतबी। इसको तो क्या बोलेंगे, फिर से पढ़ता हूं। The blood of the infidel माने काफिर, flowed so copiously at Thanesar that the stream was discolored, notwithstanding its purity, and people were unable to drink it. The Sultan returned with plunder, which is impossible to counter. There is no official estimate of the total death toll of Hindus at the hands of Islam. The biggest slaughter took place during the raid of Muhammad Ghaznavi, 1000 AD, during the actual conquest of North India by Muhammad Ghori and his lieutenant, 1192 AD, and under the Delhi Sultanate, 1206 to 1526. Professor K. Charles once estimated the Indian population declined by 50 million under the सल्तनत. 5 करोड़ लोगों को सल्तनत के टाइम में मार दिया गया था. अभी भी तुम्हारे को नेहरू और इंदिरा गांधी और सोनिया गांधी और राहुल गांधी याद आते हैं. को कहीं के डूब मरो चुल्लू भर पानी में बेवकूफो. Apart from actual killing, millions of Hindu disapproved by way of enslavement after every conquest by a Muslim invader, slave market in Baghdad and Samarkand were flooded with Hindus. Slaves were likely to die of hardship, that is, the mountain range Hindu Ko. Indian mountain was renamed Hindu Kush, Hindu killer, when one cold night in the reign of Timur Lenk लिखा हुआ है, 100,000 Hindu slaves died there while on transport to Central Asia. ठंड के मारे बेचारे मर गए थे जब उनको यहाँ से वो सेंट्रल एशिया लेके जा रहा था स्लेव बना करके. Starting with Al-Bilaturi, who wrote in Arabic in the second half of 9th century, and coming down to Sayyid Mahmud Hassan, who wrote in English in the 4th decade of the 20th. We have cited from 80 histories spanning a period of more than 1200 years. Our citation mentions 61 kings, 63 military commanders, and 14 Sufis who destroyed Hindu temples in 154 localities, big and small, spread from Khorasan in the west to Tripura in the east, and from Transoxania in the north to Tamil Nadu in the south, over a period of 1100 years. In most cases, the destruction of temples were followed by erection of mosques, madrasas, khanqahs, etc. on the temple site, and frequently with temple material. Allah was thanked every time for enabling the iconoclast concerned to render service to the religion of Muhammad by means of this pious performance. ये सीताराम गोयल साहब ने लिखा है अपनी बुक में, डिस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ टेम्पल में लिखा गया है. अमीर खुसरो described with great glee how the head of Brahmins danced from their neck and fell to the ground at their feet, along with those of the other infidel whom Malik Kafur had slaughtered during the sack of the temple at Chidambaram. Firoz Shah Tughlaq got bag full of cow's flesh and tried around the neck of Brahmins and had them paraded through his army camp in Kangra. पढ़ने में भी तकलीफ हो रही है, लेकिन जो सुनने वाले हैं उनको थोड़ा तकलीफ होगी. वो अभी भी जाके कांग्रेस की चमचागिरी करते रहेंगे. कांगड़ा, उल्लुओ, हिमाचल प्रदेश, कांग्रेस को वोट दिया तुम लोगों ने. The Islamic conquest of India is probably the bloodiest story in history. It is discouraging tale, for the evident moral is that civilization is a precious good whose delicate complex of order and freedom, culture and peace can at any moment be overthrown by barbarian, including from without or multiplying, invading from without or multiplying within. In the aftermath of invasion in the ancient cities of Varanasi, Mathura, Ujjain, Maheshwar, and Dwarika, not one temple survived whole and intact. This is the equivalent of an army marching into Paris, Rome, Florence, and Oxford and razing their architectural treasure to the ground. It is an act beyond nihilism. It is an outright negativism, a hatred of what is cultured and civilized. David J. Johnson लिख रहा है. Literary evidence of Islamic iconoclasm vis-a-vis Hindu places of worship is far more extensive. It covers a larger span of time from the 5th decade of the 7th century of the closing years of the 18th. It also embraces a larger space from Transoxiana in the north to Tamil Nadu in the south, and from Afghanistan in the west to Assam in the east. Archaeological exploration in modern times have, however, provided physical proof of literary description. The vast Kerala of Hindu culture is littered with ruins of temples and monasteries belonging to all sects of Sanatana Dharma, Buddhist, Jain, Saiva, Sakta, Vaishnava, and the rest. Almost all medieval Muslim historians credit their heroes with desecration of Hindu ideals and or destruction of Hindu temples. The picture that emerges has the following component depending upon whether the iconoclast was in a hurry on account of Hindu resistance or did his work at leisure after a decisive victory. 1. The ideals are mutilated or erased or burned or melted down if they were made of precious metal. 2. Sculptures in relief on walls and pillars were disfigured or scraped away or torn down. 3. Idols of stone and inferior metals or their places were taken away, sometimes by cartload, to be thrown down before the main mosque and in A, the metropolis of the ruling Muslim Sultan, and B, the holy cities of Islam, particularly Makkah, Medina, and Baghdad. 4. There were instances of idol being turned into lavatory seats or handed over to butchers to be used as weight while selling meat. Brahman priests and other holy men in and around the temple were molested or murdered. Sacred vessels and scriptures used in worship were defiled and scattered or burned. Temples were damaged or despoiled or demolished or burned down or converted into mosques with some structural alteration, or entire mosques were raised on the same site, mostly with temple material. Cows were slaughtered on the temple site so that Hindu could not use them again. The literary source, like epigraphic, provide evidence of the elation which Muslims felt while witnessing or narrating these pious deeds. A few citations from Amir Khusro will illustrate the point. सीताराम गोयल साहब लिख रहे हैं ये किसका लिखा हुआ है? संदीप बालकृष्णा, वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग. वाह भाई, ध्यान से सुनो भाइयों. Historical distortion has been carried out with regard to Tipu Sultan, who in many ways is Aurangzeb of South. As the author of the book on Tipu Sultan, the Tyrant of Mysore, rare publication, Chennai. यहाँ पे ध्यान रखना, कांग्रेस ने प्रॉमिस किया है कि जब हम आएंगे तो फिर से टीपू सुल्तान का जन्म शताब्दी बनाएंगे हर साल. I am both amused and amazed at the continuing effort to paint him as hero, patriot, and freedom fighter. His 17-year-long regime was primarily a tenure of military and economic terror as far as Hindus are concerned. He razed entire cities literally on the ground and depopulated them. As representative sample, we can examine his raid in Kurg, Kundagu, and the Malabar for the extent and scale of sheer barbarism and large-scale destruction. An excerpt from Bartholomew provides us a representative glimpse. First, a corps of 30,000 barbarians who butchered everyone on the way, followed by the field gun unit. Tipu was riding on an elephant, behind which another army of 30,000 soldiers followed. Most of the men and women were hanged in Calicut. First mother were hanged with their children tied to neck of mothers. The barbarian Tipu Sultan tied the naked Christian and Hindus to the legs of elephant and made the elephant to move around till the bodies of the helpless victims were torn into pieces. Temples and churches were ordered to be burned down, discredited and destroyed. Christian Hindu women were forced to marry Muhammadans, and similarly, their men were forced to marry Muhammadan women. Those Christians who refused to be honored with Islam were ordered to be killed by hanging immediately. These atrocities were told to me by the victim of Tipu Sultan, who escaped from the clutches of his army and reached Varapuzha, which is the center of Carmichael Christians mission. I myself had many victims to cross the Varapuja river by boat. Tipu Sultan, in letters to Sayyid Abdul Dulai and his officer Burdu Zaman Khan, respectively, gloats thus: with the grace of Prophet Muhammad and Allah, almost all Hindus in Calicut were converted to Islam. Only on the border of Cochin state, a few are still not converted. I am determined to convert them also very soon. I consider this as a jihad to achieve that object. और टिप्पू सुल्तान को देवता मानते हो कर्नाटका वालों, डूब मरो, नरक में जगह नहीं मिलेगी तुम्हारे को. Quite hated is the escape of the traumatized Hindus. Few Muslims realize how deeply they were wounded. They have wounded the Hindu psyche. The reason is that, unlike Christians in the Crusade, Hindus have not paid back in the same coin. How then is the Muslim to know? How then is the Muslim to know? Think of how much sound and fury did the Babri episode arouse. No Hindu, however, has said that 62 temples were discredited in Bangladesh during 1990 alone, a good 2 years before Babri Masjid. Many more after 6 December 1992. So has written Taslima Nasreen. In Pakistan, 178 temples met the same fate. Within India and Kashmir, to be precise, some 27 mandirs were destroyed. More recently, the Buddha was filled at Bamnian, Afghanistan. ये प्रफुल्ल गरोडिया लिख रहे हैं. गोरडिया. प्रफुल्ल गरोडिया book Hindu Masjid list places of Hindu worship discredited in Kashmir, 46 in 1986, 90 since 1990. It also lists province-wise name of a total of 59 Hindu temples destroyed in Pakistan. Sitaram Goyal book Hindu Temples, What Happened to Them, Volume 1, Chapter 6, Let the Mute Witness Speak, list state-wise and district-wise the particulars of Muslim monument which stand on the site and or have been built with the material of Hindu temples. It is a long 93 page, 72 to 165 list comprising hundreds of monuments. The terrible result. Even more disastrous than the Holocaust and destruction of temple described above was the destruction by the Muslim hordes of India's economy and prosperity and its grand educational system, universities, and rich culture of knowledge and mass-scale murder of its intellectual classes. The foundation of science and engineering in math is maths, and without the latter, the former are not possible. India's Hindu civilization, at its built-in pursuit of knowledge, produced maths and astronomy geniuses. India gave to the world the Hindu, wrongly called Hindi or Hindu Arab, numeral 0 to 9. Place value system, decimal system, trigonometry, calculus, and so on. That the earth moves around the sun, the earth is sphere and is not flat, and many such revolutionary ideas were postulated by the Indian mathematicians and astronomers many centuries before they were floated in the West. Given India's strong economy, 20% of the world GDP in 1000 AD, and industrial and agricultural foundation, its unparalleled prowess in maths and astronomy, its vast educational setup and unequal knowledge, inquiry, and innovation culture thanks to the Hindu civilization free from Muslim Christians, absolutists, dogmas, India would have been a massive science and industrial powerhouse centuries before the burst, had the Muslim horde not set their foot in India. In fact, the industrial evolution in Britain was fueled from the Indian loot. V.S. Napal, ये लिख रहे हैं, the invasion are in the social in all the social books, but I don't think people understand that every invasion, every war, every campaign was accompanied by slaughter. A slaughter always of the most talented people of the country. So these wars, apart from everything else, led to a tremendous intellectual depletion of the country that was ruined not by an act of nature, but by the hand of man. It is so painful that few Indians have begun to deal with it. It's much easier to deal with British imperialism. That is a familiar topic in India and Britain. What is much less familiar is the ravaging of India before the British. What happened from 1000 AD on really is such a wound that it is almost impossible to face. Certain wounds are so bad that they cannot be written about. You deal with that kind of pain by hiding from it. You retreat from reality. What I was saying is that you cannot deal with the wound so big. I do not think, for example, that people like the Incas of Peru or the native people of Mexico have ever got over their defeat by the Spaniards. In both places, the head was cut off. Fractured past is too polite a way to describe India's calamitous millennium. The millennium began with the Muslim invasion and the grinding down of the Hindu-Buddhist culture of the North. This is such a big and bad event that people still have to find polite, destiny-defying ways of speaking about it. In art books and history books, people write of the Muslims arriving in India as though the Muslims came on a tourist bus and went away again. The Muslim view of their conquest of India is a truer one. They speak of the triumph of the faith, the destruction of Vedic temple, the loot, the cutting away of the local people as slaves, so cheap and numerous that they were being sold for a few rupees. The architectural evidence, the absence of Hindu monument in the north is convincing enough. This conquest was unlike any other that had gone before. Promotion of negationist writing. As a student of India's history, ancient as well as medieval, I could see quite clearly that they were playing the Goebbelsian game of the big lie, but they could not be countered because they had come to dominate the academia and control the mass media during the heyday of the Nehru dynasty. The mention made by Maulana Abdul Hai of Hindu temple turned into mosque is only the tip of the iceberg. The iceberg itself lies submerged in the writing of medieval Muslim historian, account of foreign travelers, and reports of Archaeological Survey of India. A hue and cry has been raised in the name of secularism and national integration whenever the iceberg has chance to surface, in spite of hectic effort to keep it suppressed. Marxist politicians, masquerading as historians, have been the major contributor to this conspiracy of silence. Muslim politicians and scholars in present-day India resent any reference whatsoever to the destruction of Hindu temples in medieval times. There was, however, a time not so long ago when their predecessors viewed the same performance as an act of piety and proclaimed it with considerable pride in inscriptions and literary composition. Whatever evidence the Hindu communalist cite in this context comes entirely from Islamic sources, epigraphic and literary. Sitaram Goyal. Since about 1920, an effort has been going on in India to rewrite history and to deny the millennium-long attack of Islam on Hindus. Today, most politicians and English writing intellectuals in India will go out of their way to condemn any public reference to this long and painful conflict in the strongest term. Around 1920, Aligarh historian Muhammad Habib, father of Irfan Habib, Irfan Habib was the vice chancellor of Jamia Millia and is a historian, Chamcha of Nehru dynasty, launched a grand project to rewrite the history of the Indian religious conflict. The Aligarh stool has been emulated on a large scale. Soon its torch was taken over by Marxist historians who were building a reputation for unscrupulous history writing and in accordance with the party line. In this context, one should know that there is a strange alliance between the Indian Communist parties and the Muslim fanatics. In the 40s, the communists gave intellectual muscles and political support to the Muslim League's plan to partition India and to create an Islamic state. After independence, they successfully combined with the strategic support of Prime Minister Nehru to sabotage the implementation of the constitutional provision that Hindi be adopted as a national language, and to force India into a Soviet Arab front against Israel. Even ever since, this collaboration has continued to their mutual advantage, as exemplified by the common front to defend the Babri Masjid, the symbol of Islamic fanaticism. Under Nehru's rule, these Marxists acquired control of most of the educational and research institute and policies. Moreover, they had enormous mental impact on the Congress apparatus. Even those who formally rejected the Soviet system thought completely in Marxist categories. They accepted, for instance, that religious conflict can be reduced to economic and class contradiction. They also adopted Marxist terminology so that they always refer to conscious Hindus as communal forces or elements. Marxism dehumanizes people to impersonal pawns or forces in the hand of God history. The Marxist historian had the field all to themselves, and they set to work to decriminalize Indian history writing. That is to erase the importance of Islam as a fiction of conflict. Cannot else ने लिखा है, क्या बात लिखी है, सही बात है. Negetonism with respect to Islamic conquest of India and the conquest terrible atrocities committed for about a millennium comprises the following tactics by Nehruvian, Marxist historians and left fake liberal को liberal बोल रहा है. Simply deny or rubbish the fact, make sweeping assertion without sufficient evidence or even despite the evidence to the contrary, suppress or distort or purposely misinterpret the fact of history for subsequent noble cause of communal harmony, as if the people are fools and the truth would not be known. For where the position is indefensible, deny the motive and attribute the cause for something else. Panchma, where the evidence of the historical fact stare you in the face and it is impossible to ignore or suppress or misinterpret the same, try and minimize those facts and try to pass them on as outlier, exceptional or one-off. 6. When none of these dishonest tactics can work, try whitewashing. 7. Where even whitewashing is not possible, try whataboutery. If Muslims invader were so, what about? And try and show the other parties in worse light. ये है, सही है. तुम्हारे भगवान ने क्या किया, तुम्हारी सीता ने क्या किया, तुम्हारे राम ने क्या किया, तुम्हारे कृष्ण ने किया, अब करते रहते हैं. वही वाला whitewashing है. If none of these may work, try invectives. The party daring to question the negatist is fascist and archist. हाँ, हिंदू fascist है, negatist है, and racist and communalist है. Is a true blue Marxist communist style of labeling and abusing their opposer. अभी एग्जाम्पल दे रहे हैं, blatant example of negativism in India. Here are telling example from Arun Suri's book, Eminent Historian. ये पढ़ लिया हम लोगों ने. चलो पढ़ते हैं फिर से. Marxist Distortions historians like Irfan Habib, Romila Thapar, Satish Chandra, इनके नाम लिख लो भाई लोगों, ये कमीने हैं ये लोग, हिस्ट्री का हिस्टोरियन के नाम पर ये ब्लॉट है, काला धब्बा है। इरफान हबीब, रोमिला थापर, सतीश चंद्रा, सूरज भान, आर एस शर्मा की बुक्स एनसीईआरटी में पढ़ाई जाती हैं, सीबीएसई के बोर्ड में पढ़ाई जाती, पता नहीं अब पढ़ाई जाती कि नहीं पढ़ाई जाती। डिसीटफुल रोल इन अयोध्या, राम जन्मभूमि, बाबरी मस्जिद कंट्रोवर्सी was just symptomatic. For 50 years, this bunch has been suppressing facts and inventing lies. How concerned they pretend to be today about the objective of ICHR to promote objective and rational research into the event of our past. How does this concern square with the guidelines issued by their West Bengal government Board of Secondary Educational Circular? दर्शकों, मैं यहाँ पे बताना चाहता हूँ कि सिविल सर्विसेज के इम्तिहान में 80s में जब हम लोगों को जीके का पढ़ना होता था तो उसमें प्रेस्क्राइब होता था सिलेबस में कि आपको आर एस शर्मा को, रोमिला थापर को, इनको सबको पढ़ना है। सोचिए उस समय के जो आईएएस बने होंगे 80s में, उनके दिमाग में क्या घुसा होगा। West Bengal government in 1989, which Outlook itself has quoted, Muslim rule in India should never attract any criticism. Destruction of temple by Muslim rulers and leaders should not be mentioned. But incorporating their wholesale fabrication of the destruction of Buddhists, we are about the non-existence Aryan vision that is mandatory to question these liars is communal chauvinistic. इनके बारे में अगर क्वेश्चन करोगे तो आपको कम्युनल बोलेंगे, chauvinistic बोलेंगे। Following extracts are from Arun Sori's book, Eminent Historian. Concerned teachers in West Bengal have been so kind as to send me the circular relating to textbook of class 9 dated 28th April 89. It is issued by the West Bengal Secondary Board. 89 में वहां पर कम्युनिस्ट सीपीएम की सरकार थी। It is in Bengali and carries the number Syllabus 89.1. All the West Bengal government recognized secondary school headmasters are being informed. It begins that in history textbook recommended by this board for class 9, the following amendment to the chapter on the medieval period have been decided after due discussion and review by expert. The accompanying pages contain 2 columns. Asuddho, impurity, Suddho. अच्छा, ये हमने पढ़ लिया था पहले आ चुका है, ठीक है। मतलब जहां पर उनको गड़बड़ हो रही हो, जहां पर, तो उसको हटा दो, ये कहना चाह रहे हैं लोग, पूरा पढ़ लिया था। In a word, no forcible conversion, no massacre, no destruction of temple, just that Hinduism had created an exploitative caste society. Islam was egalitarian. Hence, the oppressed Hindus embrace Islam was egalitarian. इसलिए जो भी थे उन लोगों ने शांति से इस्लाम कबूल कर लिया, ये कहना चाहते हैं लोग। Muslim historian of those times are in raptures at the heap of kafir who have been dispatched to hell. Muslim historians are forever lavishing praise on the ruler of the temple he has destroyed. For the hundreds of thousands he has got to see the light of Islam. Law books like Hadiya prescribe exactly the option to which these little textbooks alluded. All white are washed away. Objective whitewash for objective history. And today, if anyone seeks to restore truth to these textbooks, they scream, communal rewriting of history. But there is not just whitewashing of Islam. For after Islam came another great emancipatory ideology, Marxist Leninism. The teacher furnished extract from the textbook of class 5th. In Russia, China, Vietnam, Cuba, and in other Eastern European countries, the workers and peasants are ruling the country after capturing power. Whereas in USA, England, France, and Germany, the owners of mills and factories are ruling the country. After the revolution in Russia, the first exploitation-free society was established. Islam and Christianity are the only religion which treated man with honor and thus just not whitewash thus not just whitewash, there is hogwash too. Wrote B.R. Ambedkar, there can
जी
be no.
दादा मैं आ गया हूँ, ठीक है,
मैं इसको
यहाँ
खत्म
से
कर
मैं,
दूं, ये वाला खत्म
ठीक
कर
है,
दूं.
ये वाला आप कंप्लीट कर.
Wrote Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, our great author of, क्या बोलूंगा मैं, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बोलूं, वो तो बोलता है मैं जला दो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन को, तो मैं बोलना भी नहीं चाहता उसको. There can be no doubt that the fall of Buddhism in India was due to the invasion of Musliman. Islam came out as the enemy of but. The word but, as everybody knows, is the Arabic word and means an idol. The Islamic mission to break the idols thus became the mission to destroy Buddhism, Islam. ये देख लो, बुद्धिस्टो, नीले टिड्डो, देखो तुम्हारा बाप क्या लिख रहा है. Islam destroyed Buddhism, not only in India, जो जाकर के वहां पर एक्स मुस्लिम के चैनल में बैठ करके उनकी चमचागिरी करते रहते हैं, मुसलमानों के साथ में पता नहीं क्या क्या तमाशा चलता रहता है. Islam destroyed Buddhism, not only in India, but wherever it went. The Musalman invaders sacked the Buddhist universities of Nalanda, Vikramshila, Jagadala, Udantpuri, to name only a few. They razed to the ground Buddhist monastery with which the country was studied. The monks fled away in thousands to Nepal, Tibet, and other places outside India. A very large number were killed outright by the Muslim commanders. How the Buddhist priesthood perished by the sword of the Muslim leader has been recorded by the Muslim historians themselves. ये भैया हम नहीं बोल रहे हैं, ये अम्बेडकर साहब बोल रहे हैं, तुम्हारे प्रभु जी बोल रहे हैं.
बाप, इनके बाप बोल रहे हैं.
हाँ, भगवान है इनके आज के डेट पे. अरुण सूरी, however, state, but today the fashion is to ascribe the extinction of Buddhism to the persecution of Buddhists by Hindus. बेवकूफो, ये तुम पढ़ रहे हो ना आज की डेट में कि हिंदुओं ने तुम्हारे उनको परसिक्यूट किया था. ये नहीं पढ़ रहे हो तुम्हारा बाप क्या बोलता है वहां पर. Marxist historians who have been perpetrating this falsehood have not been able to produce even an iota evidence to substantiate their concoction. The following is based on Arun Suri, eminent historian, wrote Subhash Chandra, one of the eminent negationist Marxist historian of Nehru dynasty stable, in an NCRT class 9th book on, ये भी साला नालायक था सतीश चंद्र, बेवकूफ कहीं का, हम लोगों को पढ़ाया जाता जहर इसके. Medieval India that he authored. Thus, there was no atmosphere of confrontation between the Sikhs and Mughal rulers during the period, nor was there any systematic persecution of the Hindus, and hence no occasion for the Sikh or any group or sect to stand forth as the champion of Hindu against the religious persecution. तो जो गुरुओं के सिर काटे गए थे वो तुम्हारे बाप ने काटे होंगे ना, इस सतीश चंद्र के. In sharp contrast, Sri Guru Nanak, a witness of Mughal mayhem, cried to God, having lifted Islam to the head, you have engulfed Hindustan in greed. Such cruelties have been inflicted by the Mughals, and yet your mercy remains unmoved. O Lord, these dogs have destroyed this diamond-like Hindustan. जो साले सरदार जाकर के वहां पे कराची में, लाहौर में बैठ करके हमारे खिलाफ बकवास करते हैं, खालिस्तान करते हैं, पढ़ो ना इसको, मालूम पड़ेगा. तुम्हारा सबसे पहला गुरु लिख रहा है, ये तुम्हारा पहला गुरु लिख रहा है.
अपने गुरुओं को ही नहीं जानते ये बनेंगे सरदार.
कनाडा वाले, ऑस्ट्रेलिया वाले, पढ़ो इस बुक को. कभी भी अगर ये मौका मिले, मेरे दर्शकों, मेरे आपसे हाथ जोड़ के प्रार्थना है कि इस वीडियो को दब के सर्कुलेट करो, जिससे कि इनकी सबकी आंखें खुलें, जो ये भांग खा करके बैठे हुए, पता नहीं चरस पी के बैठे हुए, क्या पीट के बैठे हुए फूंक करके. That the spirit of perverting history to suit political views is no longer confined to politicians, but has definitely spread even among professional historians. It is painful to mention that, though impossible to ignore, the fact that there is a distinct and conscious attempt to rewrite the whole chapter of the bigotry and intolerance of the Muslim ruler towards Hindu religion, a history written under the auspices of Indian National Congress, sought to repudiate the charge that the Muslim rulers broke Hindu temple and asserted that they were the most tolerant, peaceful religion of peace, my foot, or the most tolerant.
PIEC है वो. PIECE, religion of peace.
They were the most tolerant in matters of religion, following it in its footsteps. Noted historian has sought to exonerate Mahmud of Ghaznavi bigotry and fanatism, and several writers in India have come forward to defend Aurangzeb against Jadunath Sarkar's charge of religious intolerance. Majumdar साहब लिख रहे हैं. Negativism and creativity in historiography. Why unprofessional and dangerous? अब सुनो भैया लोगों, अपने चाचा के बारे में सुनो. People like Nehru had distinctly earnest notion on how history should or should not be written. If writing of what actually happened in the past could adversely affect, in their wrong opinion, the present, then give it a spin. That was their view. So be creative with history, bury or bend or ignore facts if so warranted. A thoroughly mistaken notion. Why? First, it is a false notion to presume such adverse effects. Second, if different writers presume or interpret differently, should each write a distorted history in his or her own way. Third, what really happened would anyway be known through other sources, so why play with fact? When original sources and writings by the contemporary are available, those who actually witnessed what happened and wrote about them, like Al-Baruni and others, why would those who care for history be misled by today's creative writers of history? Fourth, it is an insult to the intelligence of the general public and readers to be presumed to be gullible enough to sell wholesale what these creative writers dish out. Fifth, it is thoroughly unprofessional to take such liberties with writing of history. It is unwise to try and mold history to suit one's ideological bent or bias, or for political, religious, or social or cultural purposes. Truth should not be filtered with. People should not be taken for granted or taken for fools that they would believe the junk written like Nehru thought or Nehruvian leftist, Marxist historian or the fundamentalist thing. There has to be professionalism in writing of history. If history is painful or unpalatable, so be it. It is better to know the truth, whether it is good or bad, palatable or obnoxious. For example, one should obliterate from history or should one obliterate from history or dilute or misrepresent the fact of the 1984 anti-Sikh attack or the 2002 Godhra train coach burning or 2002 post-Godhra riot just because they are unpalatable or may cause enmity among communities? People must learn to face the truth and learn from history. In fact, प्रदीप इसको थोड़ा सा कॉपी करके उधर डाल दो चैट में. People must learn to face the truth and learn from history. ये डाल दो. In fact, the presence of what is good and what is bad also changes from time to time. Should history then keep getting rewritten? It is misunderstanding of what the history writing is all about. And silly, immature, socialistic, leftist, holier and wiser than thou, Nehruism notion of what is good for the people that leads to writing of creative and negativist history. It would normally be expected that historical writing on Muslim rule in medieval India would tell the tale of this discrimination and the suffering of the people, their forced conversion, destruction of their temples, enslavement of their women and children, continually and repeatedly mentioned by medieval Muslim chroniclers themselves. But curiously enough, in place of bringing such fact to light, there is a tendency to gloss over them or even suppress them. वो जो उनके दरबारी थे वो सही लिखते थे, फिर भी उसको इन लोगों ने छुपा दिया कि नहीं लिखना इसको. History books are not written only in India. They are written in neighboring countries also. And what is tried to be concealed here for the sake of erroneous interpretation of the nation of national integration is mentioned with pride in the neighboring Muslim countries. पाकिस्तान तो लिखते हैं वो लोग, हमने ये किया, तुम भी लिखो. And yet, some writers delude themselves with the mistaken belief that they can change their country history by distorting it. Our brain was generations of young students are humorous fundamental politicians through such unethical exercise to judge what happened in the past in the context of today's cultural milieu and consciously hide the truth is playing politics with history. Let history be accepted as a matter of fact without putting it to any subjective interpretation. Yesterday's villain cannot be made today's hero. Wow. Or inversely, yesterday's Islamic hero cannot be made into robbers ransacking temple just for treasures. Nor can the medieval monument be declared as national monument as suggested in some neo-secularist quarters. They represent vandalism. No true Indian can be proud of such discredited and indecorous evidence of composite culture. ये लाल साहब लिख रहे हैं, ये भी historian थे. Francois Gatter, in his book, A History of India Has Happened, Not As It Has Been Written, tears into the questionable narrative of Marxist historian and quotes many examples of negativism. He says, we will never be able to assess the immense physical harm done to India by the Muslim invasion. Even more difficult is to estimate the moral and the spiritual damage done to Hindu India. Finally, Gacher explained why Negetonism must be challenged. He says it is not about vengeance or of reawakening old ghost, but of not repeating the same mistake. सही बात है. What happened century ago is no reflection on the people now. Notions have changed. You insult people by twisting the facts. Should the plunder the Qasim, Ghazni, Gori, and other Islamic hordes carried out be swept under the carpet, lest it should hurt the Muslims? If Hindu king did something atrocious in the past, does it mean it should be suppressed, lest it should hurt the Hindus? Christians engaged in terrible atrocity during their campaign of conversion, inquisition, and colonization, including the Goa Inquisition. Should it be swept under the carpet? Germans educate their children on Nazi atrocities and Holocaust, lest those horrid things be repeated. There has been the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa to come out with the facts on the apartheid. Expert regret and provide for healing of old wounds. Truth must be known. Then only can one come to terms with reality and ensure the mistakes are not repeated in the future. Viewers, हमारा भी इंटेंशन यही है. इतने दिन से हम लोग ये 10वां एपिसोड कर रहे हैं. हमारा भी इंटेंशन यही है कि भैया हिस्ट्री पढ़ो और देखो कि किसने हमारे साथ में कितनी गड़बड़ की है और किन लोगों ने वो जो फैक्ट है उनको हमारे से छुपाया है सिर्फ इसके लिए कि इनकी जो वो सो कॉल्ड गंगा यमुनी तहजीब है ना वो बनी रहे. अगर आप लोग अपनी हिस्ट्री को नहीं जानोगे तो दोबारा से फिर आपके ऊपर कुछ होगा तो आप मुगालते में रहोगे और आपको फिर कोई ना कोई आकर प्लंडर करेगा, जैसे कि कोशिश की जा रही है. तो प्लीज मैं आपसे दोबारा से एक रिक्वेस्ट करता हूं कि मेरे सारे जितने भी वीडियो हैं 9 के 9 वीडियो आप ध्यान से सुने. 3 घंटा लगता है, आप पार्ट में सुने, कई दिनों सुने, लेकिन जो हमने एफर्ट्स किया है उसका फायदा आपको तभी मिलेगा जब इसके कंटेंट को आप अच्छी तरीके से समझेंगे. मैं किताब के ऑथर को बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देता हूं कि उन्होंने ये क्रूड फैक्ट, बिटर ट्रुथ पब्लिक के सामने रखा है और हमें उनको धन्यवाद देते हुए खुशी होती है कि हम बहुत किस्मत वाले हैं कि हमें उस किताब को आपके साथ में शेयर करने का मौका मिला. मैं पुराणिक साहब का तहे दिल से शुक्रिया अदा करता हूं. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद पुराणिक साहब आपका, जो आपने ये सब कुछ सत्य बताया. अभी और है डिस्टॉर्शन ऑफ हिस्ट्री बाय नेहरू हिमसेल्फ. इसके बारे में प्रदीप जी आपसे रिक्वेस्ट है कि आप इसको पढ़ें.
जी दादा. ब्लंडर 93. मैं अपना वाला शेयर कर देता हूँ. ये किताब थोड़ा बड़ा कर दूं ना इसको।
एक काम करूं क्या मैं, जो तुम शेयर कर रहे हो हम अपना फोटो हटा देते हैं, इसको पूरा फुल टीवी टाइप कर देते हैं।
ठीक
हाँ
है,
ऐसा वो ज्यादा अच्छा रहेगा। जरूरी थोड़ा ना हम तो पीछे से बोलते रहेंगे, क्या फर्क पड़ता है।
Blunder 93, Distortions of History by Nehru himself. Westernized and Anglophile Nehru examined and understood the India's heritage and historical past through the Western glasses, and his writings carried the same bias and misinterpretation. Here is a sample of simplistic, almost juvenile comment of Nehru in his The Discovery of India, driven by an arrogant presumptuousness. यही है ना दादा, presumptuousness से presumptuous
and condensing Western attitude.
हाँ, presumptuousness
presumptuousness.
अच्छा, presumptuousness, ठीक है, वही दो बार नेसनेस आ रहा था, सननेस आ रहा था, खैर presumptuousness and condescending
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 condensed है ना, condensing.
हाँ, condensing
Western attitude.
Western attitude. And yet I approached her, India को कह रहे हैं, almost as an alien critic, full of dislike of the present as well as for many of the relics of the past that I saw. To some extent, I came to her via the West and looked at her as a friendly Westerner might have done. As friendly Westerner might have done. I was eager and anxious to change her outlook and appearance and give her a grab of modernity. Nehru books betray no. Nehru's books betray no research, no breaking of any fresh ground. Although they are readable, his works cannot be considered as works of scholarship. What he wrote in Glimpse of World History and Discovery of India are re-narration of the published material, mostly by the Western scholars and their Western bias. This is nothing new to learn from it. There is nothing new to learn from it, even at the level of new conclusions or ideas. In parts, it is also wrong on facts and conclusions. His treatment of subjects in his book are superficial. You find no critical appraisals of the topics he dealt with within his books, whether on history or on politics or on economics. Many of his interpretations are stale, copycat Marxist. For a glimpse of the distortion of Indian history by Nehru, let us take several examples. Wrote Conrad else, the best known propounder of negationism was certainly Jawaharlal Nehru. He was rather illiterate concerning Indian culture and history, so his admirers may invoke for him the benefit of doubt. At any rate, his writings contain some crude cases of glorification of Muslim tyrants and concealment or denial of their crimes. With Nehru, negationism became the official line of the Indian National Congress, and after independence also of the Indian state and government. हाँ, ये बहुत बड़ी चीज है कि गवर्नमेंट भी आज इसी लाइन पे ही चलती है, इंक्लूडिंग बीजेपी गवर्नमेंट भी मैं बोल रहा हूँ. VS Naipaul stated in Economic Times of 13 Jan 2003, how do you ignore history? But the nationalist movement, independence movement ignored it. You read the Glimpse of World History by Jawaharlal Nehru. It talks about the mythical past and then it jumps the difficult period of the invasions and conquest. So you have Chinese pilgrims coming to Bihar, Nalanda. So you have Chinese pilgrims coming to Bihar, Nalanda, and places like that. Then somehow they don't tell you what happens, why these places are in ruin. They never tell you the Elephanta Island is in ruins, or why Bhubaneswar was de desecrated. ये वो दादा इनका काम करने का तरीका ही यही है, जो चीज इनके एजेंडे के अगेंस्ट जा रही है उसको गायब ही कर देते हैं हिस्ट्री से, उसके बारे में बात ही नहीं करते, काम खत्म हो गया, ना दिखेगा ना कोई बात करेगा।
नहीं, मैं ये पूछना चाहता हूँ दर्शकों से, हाउ मेनी ऑफ व्यूअर्स नो वेयर एलिफेंटा आइलैंड इज?
नहीं दादा, मुझे खुद ही नहीं मालूम है, दूसरे को क्या बोलूंगा।
बॉम्बे के सामने एक एलिफेंटा आइलैंड है जहां पर बुद्धिस्ट लोग पुराने जमाने में तपस्या करते थे। अभी भी जब राजधानी में मैनुअल टिकट मिलता था ना, तो राजधानी का टिकट होता था वो पुराने जमाने का एरोप्लेन टाइप का टिकट होता था, उसके ऊपर जो कवर होता था उसमें वहीं की जो एलिफेंटा केव की जो मूर्ति है ना वो लगी रहती थी। लेकिन यही है, किसी को बताया ही नहीं गया एलिफेंटा केव में क्या था। एलिफेंटा केव में तोपे लगी हुई हैं, वो जो राष्ट्रकूट राज के टाइम में तोपे थी उनको दिखाते हैं, वो उधर अंदर की तरफ जाने के लिए वहां पे रोक के रखा, किसी जाने नहीं देते उधर। वो
दादा ये है वहां पे, ये वहां पे मोनेस्ट्रीज है इनकी।
हाँ, अरे कितने हैं, कितनी गुफाएं बनी है वहां पर, वही मैं तो
हाँ,
कितनी बार गया हूँ, हम लोग तो कस्टम में थे, हम लोग जैसे घुसते थे वहां पर, देखो
ये रहे मोनेस्ट्रीज है पूरी अंदर।
हाँ,
ये देखिए कितनी बढ़िया बढ़िया है,
फिर
पहाड़ को काट के बनाई गई।
और पूरा
और
आइलैंड है,
ये
चारों तरफ से पानी है, बीच में है ये।
तो ये नीले टिड्डों के लिए
ये
चीचा
देखो,
की
ये
तरफ से
वाली, ये ऊपर ऊपर जा ऊपर, ये वाली जो है ना, ये एक मिनट, जो तीन तीन वाली फोटो, ये वाली, ये फोटो जो है वो राजधानी के टिकट में आती थी, ये वाली फोटो 1 2, हाँ ये वाली लंबा, इसको थोड़ा बड़ा करो, देखो ये वाली फोटो आती थी।
ज्यादा बड़ा यहाँ पे करता हूँ मैं, एक मिनट, ये वाला यहाँ पे इसको बड़ा कर देता हूँ मैं, ये रहा।
देखो
कितनी प्यारी फोटोज है, देखो मतलब
देखो
ये चीजें छुपाने का दादा रीजन क्या हो सकता है? डिस्ट्रॉय कर दी गई है इस वजह से। डिस्ट्रॉय कर दी गई है, या इनका आर्किटेक्चर जो है वो हिंदुइज्म की तरह ही दिख रहा है इस वजह से। दो में से एक ही चीज हो सकती है, यही दो बड़े रीजन हो सकते हैं। क्या, कंटिन्यू करता हूँ। हाँ, भुवनेश्वर एलिफेंटा आइलैंड का हो गया। रोड ब्रिगेडियर BN Sharma, Nehru's original distortion propounded in the discovery of India in robbing the Indian culture of its soul of Hinduism and almost making it appear as a composite culture of diverse religious faiths, mainly Islam and Christianity, had far-reaching negative influence on our modern historians. The pack of leftist and socialist historians, establishment historians, nudged on Nehru's half-baked thoughts, lost no time in rewriting history. Nehru's reading of Indian history was thoroughly flawed by the influence of the Western writers and his own predilections of looking at it from his Cambridge perch. Discovery of India. Notwithstanding, it seems Nehru had neither properly discovered the real history of India in several vital aspects, nor grasps the contemporary India, as would be clear from the following faulty interpretations of his in his letter to Lord Lothian dated 17 January 1936. India has never known, in the whole course of her long history, the religious strife that has soaked Europe in blood. Some conflicts arose when Islam came, but even that was far more political than religious. I cannot easily envisage religious conflict in India on my substantial scale. The communism of today is essentially political, economic, and middle class. One must never forget that communism in India is a latter day phenomena which has grown up before our eyes. With the coming of social issues to the forefront, it is bound to recede into background, wrote Dr. R.C. Majumdar, the renowned historian. Did Nehru forget the torrent of Hindu blood through which Mahmud of Ghazni waded to India, with Quran in the one hand and sword in the other? Did he forget Temur, Temur's invasion of India to wage war with the infidels? One would like to know sense is what sense the icono, iconoclastic fury of Firoz Tughlaq, Sikandar Lodi, and Aurangzeb, not to speak of host of others, was political rather than religious. Nor does Nehru seem to have any knowledge of Aligarh movement and its founder. He, Nehru, was unable or unwilling to face facts. For glimpse of Nehru's distortion of history, let us take another example, that of destruction of Somnath temple. For a glimpse. For a glimpse of Nehru's distortion of Indian history, let us take another example. That of destruction of Somnath temple. Mahmud of Ghazni destroyed the temple in 1024 CE. In his 16th of the 17th raids into India over a period of about 30 years, he carried away camel loads of jewels and gold. It is said that personally Mahmud. It is said that Mahmud personally hammered the temple's glided idol to pieces and carted it to Ghazni, where they were incorporated into the steps of the city's new Jamia Masjid, Friday Mosque. Thousands of defenders were massacred, including one Ghogha Rana, who had challenged Muhammad at the ripe old age of 90. अरे दादा, इतने मतलब ऐसी ऐसी बहादुरी को छुपा देते हैं और सुअरों की हिस्ट्री बताते हैं हमें. Ahmad al-Baruni, upon invitation from the Sultan of Ghazni, that's in CE 1997 to 1030, entered his service and traveled to India, spending 40 years in India, records al-Baruni in his book Tarikhul Hind. Tarikhu Hind. The linga he raised was the stone of Somnath, for Soma means the moon and Natha means the master. So the whole word means master of the moon. The image was destroyed by the Prince Mahmud. May God be merciful to him. Uh, पता नहीं कौन सी डेट है, AH416. He ordered the upper part to be broken and the remainder to be transported to his residence Ghazni with all its
It
coverings
means
and trappings.
after Hijri.
अच्छा, after Hijri, ठीक है, after Hijri 416. He ordered the upper part to be broken and the remainder to be transported to his residence Ghazni with all its coverings and trappings of gold, jewels, and embroidered garments. part of it has been thrown into the hippodrome of the town together with the chakra chakraswamin, an idol of bronze that had been brought from Thanesar. Another part of the idol from Somnath lies before the door of the mosque of Ghazni, so on which people rub their feet to clean them from dirt and wet. सीताराम गोयल, तभी गजनी का ये हाल है, पाप ही भोग रहे हैं ये। टाइम आ रहा है, थोड़े टाइम बाद बच्चे मार के अपने खाने पड़ेंगे, खाना नहीं होगा। रोड और दादा ये प्रेडिक्शन है मेरी, यही होगा। राइट जखारिया उल कज़वीनी, a 13th century Arab geographer. Somnath celebrated Somnath, celebrated city of India, situated on the shore of the sea and washed by its waves. Among the wonders of that place was the temple in which was placed the idol called Somnath. This idol was in the middle of the temple without anything to support it from below or to suspend it from above. Might have been so thanks to magnets. It was held in the highest honor among the Hindus, and whoever beheld it floating in the air was struck with amazement. Whether he was a Mussulman or an infidel, the Hindus used to go on pilgrimage to it whenever there was an eclipse of the moon, and would then assemble there to the number of more than 100,000. When the Sultan Yaminu Dola Muhammad bin Subuktigin Muhammad of Ghazni, who was son of Subuktigin, went to wage a religious war against India, he made great efforts to capture and destroy Somnath in the hope that the Hindus would then become Mohammedans. As a result, thousands of Hindus were converted to Islam. He arrived there in the middle of Zia क्या है ये जिया कदा 416 after Hijri, December 1025 CE. The king looked upon the idol with wonder and gave orders for seizing of the spoil and the appropriation of the treasures. There were many idols of gold and silver and vessels set with jewels. Yet in his book, The Discovery of India, Nehru writes about Muhammad of Ghazni and the Afghans in chapter 6, New Problems. A sentence in which goes, he met with on his way back from Somnath in Kathiawar. That's all. There is nothing more on Somnath and its destruction. But what Nehru totally omits in the history of India, he does mention a little bit on his other book, which he wrote 10 years earlier in 1935, Glimpse of World History. In chapter 51, from Harsha to Mahmud in North India, Nehru writes. So, Glimpse of World History in chapter 51, from Harsha to Mahmud in North India, Nehru writes. But it was in Somnath that Muhammad of Ghazni, got the most treasure. Nehru further writes, he, Muhammad of Ghazni, is looked upon as a great leader of Islam who came to spread Islam in India. Most Muslims
क्रिटिसाइज नहीं कर
adore
रहा है
him.
उसको, क्रिटिसाइज नहीं कर रहा है, देखो क्रिटिसाइज नहीं कर रहा है उसको, उसके जो मिल रहा है वो लिख रहा है वो कि हाँ ये मिला वो मिला, ऐसा मिल बोल रहा है।
दादा जैसी जगह पे पैदा हुआ है तो कई लोग आए होंगे, तो होगा वैसे ही वो। The most Muslims adore him. Most Hindus hate him. As a matter of fact, Muhammad was Hardly a religious man. He was a Mohammedan, of course, but that was by the way. Above everything, he was soldier and a brilliant soldier. He came to India to conquer and loot, as soldiers unfortunately do, and he would have done so to whatever religion he might have belonged. We must therefore not fall into the common error of considering Mahmud as anything more than a successful soldier. कैसा है कैसी माँ होगी क्या खा के पैदा कर दिया होगा पक्का है तो एक बाप का तो होगा नहीं ये देयर कुड नॉट बी वर्स
कितना कितना कमीना था ना, ये कितना कमीना था। बोलता है वो, ये मत सोचो, जैसे भी आजकल बोलते हैं ना कि वो जो टेररिस्ट का कोई धर्म नहीं होता है, वही वाला चक्कर है।
दादा ये इसके ये जेनेटिकली भी मेरे को साउंड नहीं लग रहा। ये बंदा ऐसा लग रहा जैसे करोड़ों लोगों ने एकत्रित करके पैदा करा हो। ये एक आध की औलाद नहीं लगती। There could have been no worse distortion of history. Nehru is laboring to convince the reader that the havoc that Mahmud wrote was not because he was Muslim, and that a person of another religion would perhaps have also done what Mahmud did. What utter nonsense! Further, Nehru does not dwell on terrible destruction Mahmud wreaked. The great Indian novelist Sarat Chandra Chattopadhyay had commented, they, Muslims, were not satisfied merely with looting. They destroyed temples, they demolished idols, they raped women. The insult on other religions and the injury to humanity was unimaginable. Even when they became kings, they could not liberate themselves from their loathsome desires. The real history is what historians of that time real history is what historians of that time, contemporaries of Mahmud, themselves wrote. As per the contemporary history, when Mahmud of Ghazni was carrying away the Shiva idol of gold from the Somnath temple, many rich traders came together and offered him even more wealth if he returned the idol. Mahmud's report was, I am an idol breaker, not an idol seller. ये सारी चीजें वो बोल रहा है, नेहरू नहीं लिख रहा। ये जो जितने भी ये कम्युनिस्ट और मार्क्सिस्ट है ना, दे डिजर्व टू बी स्लॉटर्ड। ये इनकी हालत है, ये जिंदा रहने के लायक है नहीं। बहुत ज्यादा घिनौने लोग हैं।
सोने की मूर्ति को खरीदने को तैयार थे कि ना तोड़े, तो बोलता है मैं तो तोड़ने वाला हूँ, मैं बेचने वाला थोड़ा ना हूँ।
प्रॉपर इसका एंगल है रिलीजियस, जो टीचिंग्स हैं उसी के अकॉर्डिंगली चल रहा है वो। और ये नेहरू नहीं लिख रहा है, ये उसके कोर्ट के खुद के हिस्टोरियंस लिख रहे हैं, जिनको वो खुद फंड कर रहा है, जिसको मॉनिटर भी वो खुद कर रहा है। Wrote Romila Thapar, Sheikh Farid al-Din mentions a story where the Brahmins played with Mahmud to preserve the idol, in return for which they would give him immense wealth, but he refused, stating that he is not an idol seller but an idol breaker. Wrote J.L. Mehta, Mahmud spurned the offer, wealth in exchange of the idol. However, he said that he would rather like to be known as the idol breaker. Buddh Shikan. Buddh is idol. Then the idol seller. Buddh Farosh. Nehru wrote in Discovery of India, Mahmud of Ghazni was far more a warrior than a man of faith. Then about Mathura he writes, Mahmud was anxious to make his own city of Ghazni rival the great cities of Central and Western Asia, and he carried off from India a large number of artisans and master builders. Building interested him and he was much impressed by the city of Mathura near Delhi. About this he wrote, yani Mahmud wrote, there are here a thousand edifices as firm as the faith of the faithful, nor is it likely that this city has attained its present condition, but at the expense of many millions of dinars, nor could such another be constructed under the period of 200 years. What is interesting and intriguing is that nowhere there is any mention of Nehru on how this Mahmud, the lover of buildings, as he calls him, mercilessly destroyed Mathura and Somnath. ये वो वाला पार्ट तो छुपा ही देंगे ना डिस्ट्रक्शन का. Wrote Al-Utbi, an aide and secretary of Mahmud of Ghazni, in Tarikh Yamini, the Sultan gave orders that all the temples should be burnt with naphtha and fire and leveled with the ground. Utbi wrote that Muhammad first wanted to go to Sijistan, but subsequently changed his mind for a holy war against Hind, and details how Sultan purified Hind from idolatry and raised mosques. He also states that Muslims paid no regard to the booty till they had sa- uh, sat- satiated themselves with the slaughter of the infidels and worshippers of the sun and fire. In Tabakat Tabakati Nasiri Mahina, Minhajus Minhajus Siraj hails Mahmud in क्या है ये in Tabikatai Nasiri Minhajus Siraj hails Muhammad for converting as many as 1,000 idol temples into mosques and calls him one of the greatest champions of Islam. No wonder Pakistan names their missiles Ghazni and Gori. Nehru wrote in Discovery of India of the Indians Al-Baruni, who came with Mahmud of Ghazni, says that they are hotly, foolishly vain, self-contained, and stolid, and that they believe that there is no country like theirs, no kings like theirs, no science like theirs, probably a correct enough description for the temper of the people. Nehru doesn't seem to suffer from any self respect and pride for his own country, and instead seems comfortable and fine with anything negative about Indians, but has little negative and little negative to comment on the massive destructions wrought and its wrecker Mahmud of Ghazni. Further, Nehru quotes in Discovery of India Al-Baruni writing about the havoc caused by Mahmud. The Hindus became like the atoms of dust scattered in all directions and like a tale of old in the mouths of people. Their scattered remains cherish, of course, the most invertebrate aversion towards all Muslims. Nehru then comments, this poetic description gives us an idea. So Nehru found Al-Baruni's description of terrible misfortune wrought on India and Hindus poetic. Incidentally, Al-Baruni had traveled to India with Mahmud of Ghazni during the first half of the 11th century CE. The book Al-Baruni's India is Al-Baruni's written work on India, translated by Dr. Edward C. Sassow. Here is an extract from what Al-Baruni, who was a witness of to what Muhammad did in India and to India, and who is referred to by Nehru in the quote of Nehru above, had to say. This prince, Subuktagin, chose the holy war as his calling and therefore called himself Al-Ghazi, warring on the road of Allah. Afterwards, his son Yamin Abdullah Mahmud massacred into marched into India during a period of 30 years or more. God be merciful for both father and son. Mahmud of Ghazni utterly ruined the prosperity of the country, India, and performed their wonderful exploits, by which the Hindus became like atoms of dust scattered in all directions and like the tail of old in 1 month, in the month of the people. In all directions, by which Hindus became like atoms of dust scattered in all directions and like a tail of old in the mouth of the people. Interesting thing is what Nehru chooses to quote from Al-Baruni and what he chooses to ignore. Even God cannot alter the past, but historians like Nehru and the Marxist negationalist historians can. Nehru writes a little on Aurangzeb in his book Glimpse of the World History and in detail in his book Discovery of India, but remains silent on Aurangzeb's extensive destruction of Hindu temples. Here is what Sitaram Goel wrote, quoting the contemporary Muslim historian, the author of Saka Mus- Mustad Khan, in his history completed in 1710 CE of Aurangzeb, based on the state archives recorded. The Lord Cherisher of the Faith, Aurangzeb, learned that in the provinces of पता नहीं क्या है, Multan and especially Banaras, the Brahmin misbelievers used to teach their false books in their established schools, and that admirers and students from both Hindu and Muslim used to come from great distances to these misguided men in order to acquire this vile learning. His Majesty, eager to establish Islam, issued orders to the governors of all the provinces to demolish the schools and temples of the infidels, in which the utmost urgency put down the teaching and the public practice of the religion of these misbelievers. It was reported that, according to the emperor's command, his officers had demolished the temple of Vishwanath at Kashi. During during this month of Ramadan, abounding during this month of Ramadan, abounding in miracles, the emperor issued orders for the demolition of the temple situated in Mathura, famous at the Dehra of Keshorai. In a short time, by the great exertions of his officers and destructions of this strong foundation of infidelity was accomplished, and on its site a lofty mosque was built at the expenditure of a large sum. Tarab, who had been sent to demolish the temples of Amber, Amber क्या है ये पता नहीं, Amber या Amber, returned to court on Tuesday, the 10th August 24th Rajab, and reported that he had
अंबेर
pulled
है,
down.
अंबेर अंबेर राजस्थान वाला अंबेर है वो.
अच्छा, Amber returned to court. Turab, who had been sent to demolish the temples of Amber, returned to court on Tuesday, the 10th August 24th Rajab, and reported that he pulled down 66 temples. The emperor, summoning Muhammad Khalil and Khidmat Rai, the daroga of Hasdman, हैसियत क्या है दादा, ये इसका मतलब क्या है, पुराना वर्ड है कोई, हैशे men, ordered them to demolish the temple of Pandharpur and to take the butchers of the camp there and slaughter cows in the temple. It was done. Blunder 94. Being anti-Hindu. Nehru's personality acquired a superficial Indianness and a love for English mores without developing a deep insight into the core of either culture or philosophy. Nehru had a known dislike for anyone who stood staunchly for his Indian identity and philosophy, based on our rich cultural heritage, preservation of Hindi language, and best of our old traditions. Brigadier bn Sharma बोलते हैं. नीरज चौधरी क्या बोलते हैं, Nehru was completely out of touch with the Indian life even of his time, except with the life of the self-segregating anglicized set of Upper India who lived in the so-called civil lines. और ये कौन बोल रहे हैं? Nilad Chaudhary further said that Nehru had little understanding of the actual India life or culture of the Hinduism and was a snob, contemptuous of those who spoke English with an Indian accent. N.B. Khare, the president of All India Hindu Mahasabha, had said in 1950 that Jawaharlal Nehru was English by education, Muslim by culture, and Hindu by an accident, yani birth. Ram Manohar Lohia believed that Nehru's acceptance of Anglo-Indian cultural values led to his opposing anything that would give the nation a sense of Indianness. Embedded in many of the blunders in his book are the examples of the essentially anti-Hindu and anti-Indian civilizational heritage character of Nehru, camouflaged under the Nehruvian brand of secularism. Anglophile Motilal Nehru's upbringing of Jawaharlal was such, and in turn Jawaharlal's upbringing of his dynasty was such, that they all remained cut off from the real India and developed a natural aversion for things Hindu or Indian. While on the one hand, Nehru promoted negationalism with respect to Muslim invasions and the consequent Holocaust of the Hindus, Blunder 92, and himself engaged in abject negationalist history writing, Blunder 93. Ignored the constitutional obligation of the Uniform Civil Code, Blunder 86. C. Allowed demography of the Northeast and West Bengal to be very adversely affected by the influx of Muslims from East Pakistan, Blunder 559-60, thereby compromising their culture and security, turned a blind eye to the blatant illegal proselytization by the Christian missionaries, compromising the Indian culture and the integral and the external security, particularly in the Northeast, Blunder 60 and 61. Promoted Urdu and Persian Arabic script over the Devanagari. He used his distorted notion of secularism, Blunder 85, to condemn or be brobit, brobet anything Hindu and paint those who advocated Hinduism as fascists and even opposed the renovation of Somnath Temple, Blunder 87. Please also check his context, Blunder 122 and 123. Nehru's bias against Hindu or the Hindu heritage was, besides his westernized upbringing, the result of his distorted worldview thanks to his Marxist outlook, Blunder 106 and 107. That was rejectionalist of the past. Most ironically, hypocritically, Nehru didn't apply the same yardstick to the Islamic and Christian past, wrote Sandeep Balakrishna. Indeed, Indians like Nehru could only arise as a natural consequence of thorough and in, inescape, inescapable colonized, colonized, colonized national psyche, Blunder 84, in his quest to somehow escape British colonialism. Nehru blindly embraced the Soviet variety. His secularism is the ideological love child born by fusing an incurable love for Stalinist, Stalin, Stalinist, अरे क्या यार Stalinist communism, Blunder 106, and an irretrievable alienation from his own Hindu roots. 70 years of secularism is just one long tale of a project aimed at making Hindus forget and disavow precisely this defining character. Among others, an enduring method used to accomplish this includes installing a lasting sense of self-alienation and self-loathing using the medium of formal education. The outcome is the cowardice resulting from the complete erosion of cultural self-confidence. Thanks to Nehruism, the average urban English-educated Indian Hindu since independence is a starter in his own land and has today brought to fruition Ananda Kumaraswamy prophetic warning that the Hindu is a nondescript and superficial being deprived from all roots, a sort of intellectual pariah who does not belong to the East or the West, the past or the future. Given below are some extracts from the Nehru Discovery of India Kindle edition from Amazon. There are illustrative of Nehru's anti-Indian Hindu cultural heritage and pro-Muslim Western mindset.
मत पढ़ वो रिपीटिशन है वो.
तो कौन सी जगह से स्टार्ट करना?
किसको?
95.
नहीं, इसको पढ़ना नहीं है, इसको छोड़ दो. ये कौन इसको इम्पोर्टेंस क्या देने का? वो तो वही कह रहा है ना, ये द डिके ऑफ सिविलाइजेशन इज एनफ इवन बिफोर द टर्किश एंड अफगान इन्वेजन बोल रहा है. कुछ भी बकवास किए जा रहा है यार, क्या बोलोगे? इतना ही बहुत है. बहुत गालियां दे ली इसके बारे में, बहुत हो गया. क्या है?
अरे ये
So as per Nehru, while the civilization of media has decayed, that of the invading Muslim hordes was superior and carried new ideas. क्या मतलब है इसका? कुछ भी लिखता है.
अरे दादा 1400 साल पहले कौन से न्यू आइडियाज चल रहे थे जो आज? बस यही है कि उन्होंने जिहाद के नए नए तरीके ढूंढ लिए, बस इतना ही फर्क आ गया है, बाकी सारा सेम है. Democracy and dictatorial tendencies. Nehru's blunder 95. Nehru's dictatorial ways. Deep inside his heart, Nehru always was a dictator and first-rate politician and manipulator. He feared only Gandhi and Patel. Gandhi because of his moral authority and complete grip on the masses, and Patel because of his firmness, unwillingness to be emotionally blackmailed, and the writ in the party. Historian Makhan Lal. The last straw has been, ये डीपी मिश्रा लिख रहे हैं. The last straw has been our prime minister becoming a full-fledged dictator by contriving the ejection of Mr. P.D. Tandon from the presidency.
123 में ब्लंडर नंबर 123 में रिपीट होगा, छोड़ दो इसको.
ठीक है. Nehru leveraged the democratic process to gain and retain power, but temperamentally he was more a dictator than a democrat. He filled up the top party post and the cabinet with yes men so that he could exercise unhindered power and freely interfere in the workings of the party and ministries not under his direct charge. Calling Nehru for the first time the Congress dictator, C.R. Rajaji also said, this single brain activity of the people who met in Congress is to find out what is in Jawaharlal's mind and to anticipate it. The slightest attempt at dissent meets with stern disapproval and is nipped in the bud, Rajaji says. ये कौन? हाँ. Within months of his tenure as first PM, Nehru began acting whimsically and dictatorially without consulting the cabinet and the senior colleagues, leading to the well-known rift with Sardar Patel. Patriotic and democratic Sardar Patel was forced to question Nehru's methods, leading even to Sardar's resignation in December 1947. The exchange of letters among Nehru, Sardar Patel and Gandhi between November 1947 and January 1948 clearly bring forth the issues of Nehru dictatorial working Sadly, Gandhi failed to correct Nehru prior to his assassination on 30th January 1948. इसीलिए तो नहीं मार दिया. Please also check Blunder 30, Patel's response to Gandhi in January 1950 on the PM's duties and powers. Even Acharya Kripalani resigned from the presidency of the Congress in November 1947, protesting timidity of India against Pakistan, its mishandling of Kashmir issue, and demanding revocation of the standstill agreement signed with the Nizam of Hyderabad. Among the many disastrous results of Nehru's dictatorial working was his series of decisions that were really major blunders on Kashmir without taking his cabinet into confidence. Once the stalwarts like Gandhi and Sardar Patel, who were no more, Nehru had a free, unbridled play. One can indulge the wise, rational, enlightened, and benevolent semi-dictatorship of people like Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, who within 2 decades took Singapore from a third world country to the top first world country. But can one indulge the blunders after blunders of a democratically elected dictator like Nehru and the condemned India to be third rate, third world country?
ये
This is
नीचे
what
वाला हम
Doctor
लोग पढ़ चुके हैं,
ये वाला this is what
पढ़ चुके हैं। अम्बेडकर ने जो लिखा था ना, पढ़ चुके हैं, रेजोल्यूशन में लिखा है, पढ़ लिया। ये पढ़ो, रोड केम मुंशी वाला, जवाहरलाल वाज a dictator by temperament but had an intellectual aversion to dictator like Hitler and Stalin. ये पढ़ लो।
he swore by the constitution but was ever ready to defy or ignore it. Entrenched as he was in unlimited powers, he could never realize the harm that he was doing to the country by twisting the constitution to his liking. John Mathai was an economist who served as India's first railway minister and subsequently as India's finance minister between 1949 to 1951. Being pro-Nehru, he was initially prejudiced against Sardar Patel, but he soon discovered Nehru's feel of clay, and remarked, under Nehru, the cabinet had never functioned, and all the decisions were taken privately by the Prime Minister and the individual minister concerned. Even when the decision was endorsed in the cabinet, the Prime Minister went back on it and reversed the decision. The only time when the Indian cabinet really functioned was when Nehru was away in Washington for a few weeks towards the end of October 1948, when Sardar Patel was acting as Prime Minister. For the first time, the cabinet functioned with joint responsibility, and the acting Prime Minister conducted meetings as the British Prime Minister would have. For the for his honest and forthright views, especially on the Planning Commission, rather than allowing diversity of opinion and resolving issues democratically through discussions in the cabinet and other forums. John Mathai, then finance minister, was eased out by Nehru from the cabinet. How democratic Nehru was would be clear by this extract from Neville Maxwell's book India's China War. There was a cabinet committee for foreign affairs, but that too Nehru ignored more often than not, and time and again crucial foreign policy decisions were taken and announced, even acted upon without either the committee or the cabinet being aware of them. This was the true handling of the boundary questions with China, which was kept not only from the cabinet, which was kept not only from the cabinet and its foreign affairs and defense committees, but also from the parliament until armed clashes made it impossible to suppress. If you are arrogant, then entertain false notions of your own ability, knowledge, and understanding. then you either don't listen to others or are dismissive of the opinions of others and tend to be undemocratic. You don't realize your own limitations. You don't realize you need to, to involve others, pool the expertise, and then evolve a sensible joint solution. Observing your behavior, people stop telling you the truth. Instead, they tell you only what you want to hear. You thus cut off honest opinions and feedback, wrote Rustamji. But
छोड़ दो,
when you
आगे वाला मत पढ़, छोड़ दे, वही लिख रहा है वो.
Blunder 96, Nehru, power trumps principles. Despite being already in the powerful position of a PM, Nehru maneuvered to also become the Congress party president in 1951 and retained that position till 1954 to ensure a voice-like grip for himself both on the government and the party machinery. Even though it flew in the face of Congress party principle of one person, one post, Nehru then realized his presidency in then Nehru then released his presidency in 1955 to his lackey and nobody like UN Debar, and allowed him to continue in the post till 1959, after which he again maneuvered to get his daughter Indira Gandhi elected as the party president in 1959. Ironically, while he himself simultaneously held the post of party president and the PM, he got a similar setup banned at the state level. He got a party resolution passed in 1953 forbidding the state CMs from simultaneously holding a post in the PCC, Pradesh Congress Committee, on the ground that the CMs have too much office work to be able to devote time for the party work. Didn't a PM have as much work? Height of hypocrisy. Why he didn't want the state CMs to get powerful and ever challenge him or his daughter later. Not only that, he gradually sidelined even the future competitors to his daughter Indira through the Kamaraj Plan of 1963 and other means to ensure continuance of power for his dynasty. If someone should have first if someone should have first exited the government under 1903 Kamaraj Plan, it should have been Nehru himself for his 1962 India-China War debacle, Blunder 36, and for his failure in many other spheres. Nehru was an agnostic, but his God was power. Principles were fine to enhance one's image, but if they come in the way of power for himself and after him for his dynasty, Nehru unhesitat- unhesitating, unhesitatingly unhesitatingly and unscrup-
Scrupulously, scrupulously.
unscrupu- unscrupulously chose power. Nehru ranted on secularism and against communism and casteism. But when it came to the selection of candidates for elections, both religion and caste were critical considerations for him. And for the Congress, that was subservient to subservient to
To him.
him. Nehru described capitalist. Nehru decried capitalist, but if they obliged his party by filling in its election war chest for a quid pro quo, Nehru's principles never came in the way. Socialism was not merely a fad for Nehru. What appealed to Nehru is his dynasty in socialism was its vote gathering and power grabbing potential by its appeal to the poor and the powerless. Blunder 97. Nehru curbed freedom of expression. Indian
ये
Constitution
जरूरी
took
पढ़ना
a
है, बहुत जरूरी है, बहुत जरूरी है, बहुत जरूरी है.
Indian Constitution took a regrettable turn on 10th May 1951 when Nehru piloted the first amendment of the Indian Constitution that became a law which, among the other provisions, restricted freedom of expression (FOE) by amending Article 19, Clause 1A. In sharp contrast to Nehru, the First Amendment of the United States Constitution did the reverse. It, it expanded the freedom of expression (FOE), prohibited the making of any law respecting an establishment of religion, ensuring that there is no prohibition on the free exercise of religion, uh, abridging the freedom of speech, infringing on the freedom of press, in, interfering with the right to peacefully assemble, or prohibiting the petitioning for a governmental redress of grievances. The First Amendment, along with 9 others, was adopted on 15 December 1791 and constituted the Bill of Rights.
क्या बोलना चाह रहे हो? जो
मतलब जहां
इंडिया में
अमेरिका
फर्स्ट अमेंडमेंट हुआ था दैट वाज टू
हाँ
कर्टेल फ्रीडम ऑफ एक्सप्रेशन, और अमेरिका में जो फर्स्ट अमेंडमेंट हुआ था दैट वाज टू अलाउ फ्रीडम ऑफ एक्सप्रेशन. ये
दादा अभी मैं कुछ बाद में दिखाऊंगा, लेकिन क्वेश्चन पहले पूछ रहा हूँ. अगर कोई ऐसा प्रोविजन कोई स्टेट बनाता है जो कि फ्रीडम ऑफ रिलीजन के अगेंस्ट चला जाता हो, या राइट मतलब किसी को जो है रिलीजन को प्रैक्टिस करने की रिलीजन के किसी अंग को प्रैक्टिस करने से रोकता हो तो क्या वो अनकॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल होगा?
हाँ.
फिर ऐसा एक रूल मैं अभी बाद में दिखाऊंगा, पहले ये कंप्लीट करूंगा. ऐसा लॉ दिखाऊंगा जो स्टेट में बना है. ये हो गया ना बिल ऑफ राइट्स तक. नेहरू अमेंडमेंट वाज परहैप्स प्रोवोक्ड बाय द सुप्रीम कोर्ट जजमेंट ऑफ 1950 on the Ramesh Thapar versus the State of Madras case, through which the ban of Thapar's Marxist journal Crossroads was lifted. Through the case, the Supreme Court had effectively recognized unfettered freedom of expression as compliant with our original constitution, like in the US. Thanks to Nehru's amendment above, poor Majiru Sultanpuri, the famous and brilliant lyricist and poet, was thrown into
जेल.
Arthur Road Jail in Mumbai in the early 1950s for a year for writing a verse critical of Nehru. Dharampal, 1922 to 2006, is highly regarded thinker, scholar, author on the groundbreaking book The Beautiful Tree. Among his many other profound works, who had addressed an open letter to Nehru critical of the humiliating 1962 India-China war debacle, was also jailed by Nehru. Nehru was indeed terribly vicious and retributive towards his critics, and yet there are those who extol him for FOE, freedom of expression. During the Nehruvian era, a number of books, films, and film songs that appeared directly or indirectly critical of the government were censored or banned. For example, the famous poet Pradeep's song in the film Amar Rahe Ye Pyar of 1961 was censored because of these lines. है सियासत कितनी गंदी बुरी है कितनी फिरकाबंदी, आज ये सबके सब नर नारी हो गए रास्ते के ये भिखारी. ये लाइन की वजह से बैन कर दी गई थी. ये सेंसर कर दिया गया था. नेहरू वाज नॉट रियली अ लिबरल इन द क्लासिकल सेंस, nor was he familiar with the intrinsic Hindu ethos or of freedom of expression and free flow of ideas. Hinduism allows, even encourages people to discover their own truth. Tibet episode, another glaring example of Nehru's anti-freedom of expression stand. Please check the background of other details under Blunder 33. Erasure of Tibet as a nation. This is what Sitaram Goel highlighted. But public opinion in India was excised about Chinese occupation of Tibet as it meant a threat to India's own security. Apart from suppression of Tibetan freedom, nothing could be done immediately to mobilize public opinion and put pressure on the government of India to change its China policy. It was only on August 22, 1953 that a meeting of leaders from various patriotic political parties, including members of parliament, decided to raise unofficial India's voice to protest against the continued occupation of Tibet. The meeting set up a Tibet committee and announced a Tibet Day to be observed in September. But as soon as the news of this idea being mooted appeared in the press, the Prime Minister came out against it in a public statement issued the very next day. According to Hindustan Times, dated August 26, he referred to a report that some persons proposed to hold a Tibet Day. He thought that it was ill-advised and asked members not to take any interest in it. The meeting on August 22 had set up a Tibet Day committee under the championship of Sri Gurupadas Swami, a Praja Socialist PSP member of parliament at the time. But another MP of the committee, Professor N.G. Ranga, had to tender his resignation from the committee on August 28 under the pressure from the Prime Minister, whose with whose party he was at that time negotiating the merger of his own provincial provisional Krishakar Lok Party in Andhra Pradesh. The committee, however, did its duty by the country and the cause of human freedom in Tibet. More than 80% marched to the Chinese embassy in New Delhi, carrying placards and raising slogans asking Red China to vacate Tibet. Later on, a meeting was held in New Delhi town hall and addressed, among the others, by Sri Gurupadas Swami, Sri VP Joshi of Janasangh, and Munshi Ahmad Deen of the Praja Socialist Party. The Prime Minister felt annoyed with this effort and put pressure on the press in New Delhi not to publish news from the Tibet Day demonstration and meeting. It became widely known in journalist circles that those days that Firoz Gandhi, the son-in-law of the Prime Minister and a director of the Express Group of newspapers at that time, explicitly explicitly ordered the ordered his chain everywhere not to report these events in the capital. A few days later, the Prime Minister did something infinitely worse. Speaking on foreign affairs in the Rajya Sabha on September 23, he denounced and threatened the organizers of the Tibet Day in a language which was wild. He said, "Sometimes, not often, I am glad to say, some exuberant people organize some demonstrations or other against friendly countries. They proclaim a Tibet Day. Why anyone should proclaim a Tibet Day passes my why anyone should proclaim a Tibet Day passes my comprehension, more especially at this juncture. Why the genius who was suggested it, or whose bright idea it was, I do I do not know. But anyhow, here is this Tibet Day about 10 days ago. Nobody had noticed it, but a dozen or 2 dozen person marched through the streets of Delhi to proclaim their love of Tibet and marched to the Chinese embassy and demonstrated in front of it with loud cries. Well, it is rather childish. All this and extraordinary that grown up persons should have behaved in this way and showed up because of because If a couple of dozen of persons do this, it does not indicate, if I may so, any powerful body of opinion. In fact, it indicates their own smallness and folly. I mention this because it is perfectly ridiculous. I don't mind if anybody thinks so and wants to oppose us. Not in argument or debate or even in public streets. Well, if he goes beyond a certain limit, any government will have to take action. We don't take any action, normally speaking. We have not, but what I want this house to consider is extreme. Well, I use the word folly of such activities. Members of this house do not attach any importance to it, I know. But there is there is the rest of the world which exaggerates and which may be interested in exaggerating these incidents which come at a moment when we seek help in delicate matters in developing a spirit of friendly cooperation and tries to create trouble. This statement was full of in insinuations. Here was the prime minister of a democratic country showing extreme intolerance for and interfering publicly with other people's freedom to think and express opinion about matters which concern the security of the nation. The Communist Party of India and its fronts had built up before his own eyes a formidable apparatus which was leading demonstrations every now and then against this or that foreign embassy and heaping the foulest possible abuse on several friendly countries. The Prime Minister has to this day never uttered a word against even acts of hooliganism enacted by the communists outside those embassies, burning cars, stoning, and manhandling of his staff. But a small and dignified protest on the part of some patriots to draw the attention of their people and government to the threat posted by China's illegal invasion of a buffer state made the prime minister furious and robbed him of all sense of proportion and propriety. The prime minister had shown himself partial to a communist cause in utter disregard of national interest. In the process, he had made himself utterly ridiculous as well. One on the one hand, he said again and again that protesters against China were only a few people who represented no one except themselves. On the other hand, he chose to spend so much breath and create the impression that the event was very important. His threat of action against the protesters, of course, was nothing short of criminal. हो गया दादा 97 हाँ हो गया
फिनिश्ड ग्रेट जय भारती साहब आ गए वापस वाह बंद करो
2.5 घंटे से 3 मिनट ऊपर हो गए है ना
इसको 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 हटाओ ना शेयरिंग बंद करो
ठीक है
नाना जी
जय दादा नमस्कार हिरोमय भाई नमस्कार नमस्कार तेजवीर भाई
नमस्कार प्रदीप जी
किसी को बोलने का मौका नहीं दिया मैंने
नहीं आपका फ्लो है अच्छा चल रहा था और आई रियली अप्रिशिएट यू प्रदीप एंड विवी दादा कि आपने ये ऐसी हिस्ट्री हमारे सामने रखी जो हमें बिल्कुल पता नहीं थी
ये टेम्पलेट हो गया था ये आप देखो मतलब 1000 साल के टॉर्चर के बाद फर्दर अभी तक टॉर्चर चल रहा था अभी भी कोई ऐसा नहीं है कि बीजेपी गवर्नमेंट आने से सब बढ़िया हो गया नहीं बढ़िया नहीं हुआ है कुछ रिलीफ आ गया बस
हाँ बिल्कुल, ऐसा ही है आपकी बात।
आप ये नहीं कह
अभी
सकते
चल
कि
रहा
सब
है,
कुछ बढ़िया हो गया।
अब उनकी भी कुछ मजबूरियां रही होंगी कि जो ऐसा
हाँ
अब नहीं
बिल्कुल।
कर पा रहे हैं, क्योंकि अपना
नहीं
प्रॉब्लम उन बीजेपी की नहीं बोल सकते, प्रॉब्लम हमारे ही लोगों की है।
नहीं, हमारी भी है। देखिए, इतने अगर 1070 साल या 1060-65 साल का इतना बड़ा कोई पीरियड रहा हो, बुरा समय रहा हो किसी के ऊपर, किसी सिविलाइजेशन के ऊपर, मैं दूसरी सिविलाइजेशन की बात करूंगा तो 20, 25, 30 साल में वो खत्म हो गई हैं। ठीक है, ऐसा पीरियड आता है ना किसी और सिविलाइजेशन के ऊपर, पर्शियन ले लो, बेबीलोनियन ले लो, ठीक है। अब कोई सिविलाइजेशन ले लो, 50 साल 60 साल का पीरियड उनकी ऐसी तैसी कर देता है, पूरी सिविलाइजेशन वाइप ऑफ हो जाती है। लेकिन मोराल को अब जल्दी से वापस खड़ा करना पड़ेगा। मैं ये नहीं कह रहा कि जो है बीजेपी खराब है, मैं सिर्फ इतना कह रहा हूँ, फैक्ट ऑफ द मैटर इज कि जो है इतने साल के प्रॉब्लम के बाद अब जो है थोड़ा सा सही हुआ है। मैं ये नहीं कह रहा सारा सही हो गया है,
नहीं,
ठीक है,
अभी
हुआ
बीजेपी
नहीं।
जो है, बीजेपी वो है, वो बीजेपी न्यूट्रल है, मतलब हम लोग बात कर पा रहे हैं
नहीं नहीं,
सॉरी।
मैं सही स्टेट उसकी बता देता हूँ। मैं खुद न्यूट्रल हूँ, इसलिए मैं सही स्टेट बता देता हूँ।
ठीक है, ठीक है।
बीजेपी जो है न्यूट्रल से जस्ट पीछे है, अभी न्यूट्रल तक नहीं आई है, इतना मैं आपको बता सकता हूँ। अब ये किस वजह
बिल्कुल
से है
करेक्ट है
वो
प्रदीप
हो
जी।
रहा है, अभी आप उसको प्रॉपर न्यूट्रल नहीं कह सकते। अब वो किसी वजह से भी हो सकता है, वो जाने। सही बात है ना तेजवीर भाई?
हाँ बिल्कुल अपना प्रदीप भाई, अभी वो जैसे आपने बोला
हाँ,
न्यूट्रल से
क्योंकि
बिल्कुल
उनको
पीछे है।
इलेक्शन भी जीतना
लेकिन
होता है।
अगर हमारी पॉपुलेशन है जो अपना सही अपना माइंड लगा के अगर इस चीज को समझे और उनको अपना फुल पावर दें और भी जितनी उनको चाहिए होगी और उनका साथ दिया जाए, तभी अपना ये चीज सॉल्व हो सकती है, नहीं तो ये चलती
एक
रहेगी।
एकता बना के उसके बाद गवर्नमेंट को इंडिकेशन दे दो कि हमारी ये मांग है, एकदम
डिमांड है
क्लियर उसको
बिल्कुल।
इंडिकेशन दे दो। हाँ, इंडिकेशन दे दो कि हाँ हम एक हो गए हैं, हमारी वोटिंग एक साथ होगी। उसके बाद फिर आप गवर्नमेंट को बोलो कि भाई हमारी ये इस साइड में चलो, अब वो रह गया, लिबरांडू बना बंद करो, ठीक है।
जी। अब
वोटिंग में
देखिए ना,
लिबरांडू बना करती है ना।
पाकिस्तान की अपन न्यूज आज की देख ही रहे होंगे कि वो एक इमरान खान के पीछे अपना पूरी जनता है, तो कोर्ट को भी अपना अब ठंडा होना पड़ गया है।
हाँ हाँ, आप देख रहे हो ना, वो कोर्ट कह रहा
ये
ठीक है,
पावर है ना उनकी।
तुम
हम्म।
नहीं कोर्ट में आओ, हम घर में आ जाते हैं तुम्हारे। है कि नहीं? कोर्ट करे
ये
भाई
चीज
कब
होती है।
आओगे बता दो, एक बार शक्ल दिखा दो, कोई बात नहीं, मत कहना कुछ। ठीक है, तुम नहीं आ रहे तो हमें ही टाइम दे दो, हम ही घर पे आ जाए।
ये चीज है।
है कि नहीं? कोर्ट का यही हाल हो गया
लेकिन
था ना। अच्छा
हाँ,
खान साहब,
इस चीज को और
आप
भी
मैं ही
एग्जाम्पल
आ
लेके,
जाऊं?
इस चीज को एग्जाम्पल लेते हुए हमारे देश की जनता को भी समझ जाना चाहिए कि अगर हम अपना गलत चीजों में पड़ते रहे तो पाकिस्तान जैसा हमारा भी हाल हो सकता है।
ये तो लिबरांडू नहीं समझ रहे हैं ना, ये सोच रहे हैं हर जगह ये एंजॉय करते रहेंगे। नहीं भाई, जब कयास होता है ना तो सब मारे जाते हैं, तुम्हारे बच्चे भी मारे जाएंगे। तुम क्या सोच रहे हो कयास तुमने यहाँ मचा रखा है? लिबरांडू तुम यही हो? नहीं, तुम यूएस में भी हो, तुम यूके में भी हो, तुम यूरोप में भी हो। कयास होगा, सब मरेंगे तुम्हारे बच्चे। ऐसा नहीं है कि कोई वो जो है सुपर पावर रखते हैं कि वहां से गायब हो जाएंगे जहाँ कयास हो रहा होगा, एकदम से पब्लिक आ
और
गई तो
मजे
जो
की
है।
एक बात और है प्रदीप भाई कि देखो अब जो काम हो रहा है पाकिस्तान में हो रहा है, वो धरना प्रदर्शन दे रहे हैं अपना कनाडा में और यूके में।
हाँ, अरे
चलिए आप
पाकिस्तान को
बात
उठा
को।
के ले, कह रहा हूँ पाकिस्तान को उठा ले जाओ, कनाडा और यूके में ही धर लो।
हम्म।
वहां के लोग क्या कर लेंगे यार? बहुत ज्यादा होगा तो थोड़ा सा पॉलिटिकल प्रेशर डाल देंगे बस।
अच्छा,
जय
वो
दादा,
आपने जो बोला कि पाकिस्तान कनाडा और कहाँ बोला, कौन सी जगह का कनेक्ट किया?
अरे ये जिस जगह भी रहेंगे उसी जगह
यूके।
वहां ही प्रोटेस्ट करने लग जाते हैं।
अच्छा,
पता नहीं इनको क्या
पाकिस्तान
मिलता
कनाडा
है।
ये को कनेक्ट करें, किस विषय में कनेक्ट कर रहे हैं आप लोग?
क्वेश्चन दोबारा रिपीट करना।
नहीं, मैं ये बोल रहा हूँ आपने
मैं
पाकिस्तान,
बता देता
कनाडा
हूँ,
और को किस
मैं
विषय
बता
में
रहा हूँ।
कनेक्ट किया है, जरा ये बताइए किस
वो
विषय
इस
में कनेक्ट
विषय में कनेक्ट किया है, जो प्रॉब्लम चल रही है पाकिस्तान में, उसके लिए वहां प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे हैं वो। ठीक है, जैसे कि वहां का प्राइम मिनिस्टर हो वो भाई यहाँ के मैटर से, इंटरनल मैटर से उन देशों का क्या मतलब है? वो क्या करेंगे उसमें? अपनी फौज भेज देंगे वहां?
अच्छा, मतलब पाकिस्तानी लोग, जो पाकिस्तानी कनाडियन है, वो लोग प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे हैं कनाडियन गवर्नमेंट के खिलाफ, राइट?
अरे नहीं यार,
नहीं,
पाकिस्तान में
जैसे इमरान खान को इधर इधर मैं समझाता हूँ प्रदीप जी भाई, अपना जैसे पाकिस्तान में वो मसला है इमरान खान को पकड़ने वाला, ठीक है, लेकिन वो उसको छुड़वाने के लिए वो अपना उधर भी अपना यूके और कनाडा में भी वो अपना प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे हैं।
अच्छा, मैं तो वही
ये
तो बोल
चीज
रहा
है,
था जो
तो मैं उनकी बताना चाह रहा हूँ कि उनकी हिम्मत और पावर देखो ना, कि वो पाकिस्तान में तो कर ही रहे हैं, लेकिन अपना दूसरे कंट्रीज में भी कर सकते हैं वो एकजुट ऐसे हो जाते हैं। और हमारे में तो अपना पड़ोस वाले ही नहीं अपना एकजुट हो सकते, बाकियों को क्या कहना है। मैं ये एग्जांपल देना चाह रहा था।
पाकिस्तान में कोई कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन है नहीं ना, वहां पे आर्मी रूल कर रहा है और वो लोग अभी भी डोमिनियन है, जरा समझे इस बात को
भाई, इस पे बाद में बात कर लेंगे।
जियाउल हक ने
हिरोन भाई,
मतलब बोलेगा
इस पे बाद में बात कर लेंगे, थोड़ा सा आउट ऑफ टॉपिक जा रहा है ना, फिर बैक स्टेज में बात करते हैं इस पे आराम से, ठीक है? जय दादा, नमस्कार। अगर थोड़ा टाइम हो तो बस अपने कमेंट्स दे दो, फिर मैं इसको रैप अप कर देता हूँ, अगर देना चाहते हो तो।
वो कॉल में बिजी होंगे शायद, उन्होंने बोला वो 30 मिनट्स तक बिजी रहेंगे, वो इज बिजी स्टिल कॉल फॉर द नेक्स्ट 30 मिनट्स, उन्होंने ऐसा कहा।
ठीक है, तो मैं एक काम करता हूँ, अभी इसको वो कर देता हूँ, रैप अप कर देता हूँ, ठीक है? फिर बैक स्टेज में बात कर लेते हैं। तुम्हारा पाकिस्तान का जितना भी वो है, वो सब कर देंगे, ठीक है? छुड़वाना होगा तो छुड़वा देंगे जाके, ठीक है? तो उसको
ठीक है, ओके, कोई बात नहीं।
ठीक है, तो हम ब्लंडर्स ऑफ नेहरू पार्ट 10 को लेके आपके सामने आए। जो इंफॉर्मेशन थी, जो लिखा हुआ था, वो आपके सामने रख दिया। अब आप अपने आप फर्दर रिसर्च करिए, क्या क्या हुआ था, क्या नहीं हुआ था। आप फर्दर रिसर्च भी कर सकते हैं, बुक आपको बता दी जाएगी, लिंक में डाल दी जाएगी, ताकि आप खुद भी पढ़ सकते हैं अगर आपको टाइम मिले। तो ये इंफॉर्मेशन अगर आपको वैल्यूएबल लगती है तो आप अपने दोस्तों के साथ सर्कल में शेयर करें, और जो है शेयर करें, सब्सक्राइब करें, कमेंट ज़रूर करें कैसा लगा आपको। और अगर आपने नोटिफिकेशंस ऑन नहीं कर रखी हैं तो प्लीज़ बेल आइकन प्रेस कर दीजिए, ऑल उसमें सिलेक्ट कर लीजिए, ताकि सारी नोटिफिकेशंस आपको मिल जाए। और इसी के साथ हम अभी विदा लेते हैं आपसे, यानी अब हम जो है अगला पार्ट लेके आपके सम्मुख फिर प्रस्तुत होंगे अगले एपिसोड में।
जय हिंद, तब
तो
तक के लिए जय हिंद, वंदे मातरम।
धन्यवाद।
जय हिंद, वंदे मातरम, भारत माता की जय।